Hello everybody, good evening and welcome to your very own BYJU'S 9th and 10th grade channel. I'm your teacher Aishwarya, and as a part of our ongoing Exam Ed series, we are back with the next most important chapter in biology, that is control and coordination. And in our class today, we are going to be revising the entire important concepts, and we are going to be solving some important questions as well. So I hope all of you are excited for today's class, and very quickly, since this particular class is being live streamed, I hope that my audio, my video and my screen and whatever I'm writing on the screen is visible to all of you. If it is, give me a quick thumbs up and let me know that we are good to go. Good evening, Anshika, Avi, Divyanshu, and Team 7 guy. Hello, Moksham, Zia, Student Ash, Zimra, Natika. Good evening, good evening. Thank you for the belated Teachers' Day wishes as well. Thank you so much. Yes, are we ready for today's class? Now, like I said, our class today is going to be a pretty long class. Since for those of you who are very regular in class, you get to know that, last week itself I told you that our class today is going to go for at least 2.5 hours. Okay, today now only I'm telling you this very minute. 2.5 hours, 2-3 hours is what I am expecting for our class today, which is why right away in the beginning I am telling you, I hope that you've come prepared for today, because I want to make sure that all of you are ready. Yes? And I want to make sure that all of you pay attention in class, because I don't want you all to spend too much time. I don't want you to think that this chapter is very tough, that I go on and on with the certain concepts at one shot. If I clarify all your doubts, then that way you will feel confident for the exams. No problem, Shiva. I'm so happy that you take so much effort for us, right? It means a lot to us. Yes? Dinner break, I don't know if I can give you, but you can eat dinner side by side, but I will give you breaks, right? So what can we expect in our class today? So first and foremost, we are going to be doing a chapter revision, right? So I'm expecting that chapter revision, along with which I will tell you important topics and what kind of questions will come. This right here is going to maybe take me about an hour, right? I'm expecting 1 hour to maybe 1.5 hours to do this particular part. Yes? Then along with that, I will be doing important questions, and we have a total of 15 questions, out of which some are going to be PYQs mainly. So this right here is going to be happening in the latter half of it. Yes? Yes, I will do exemplar questions also. Don't worry, right? Don't worry. Yes? All of it is going to happen today. So what would I need for all of you to be, or what would I request from all of you? First and foremost, this is my preamble to my class. Have your notebook and textbook ready. Please make sure you have your stationery ready. Please make sure you have your water bottle ready. Today's class, as we know, will run for 2.5 hours. So make sure that you have lots of water in case if you want to eat. You can eat dinner and come. See, I'm not somebody who says that don't eat dinner in my class. No, I know that, you will want to have dinner. Then, of course, have a quiet place to study. If you are going to spend so much time in my class today, might as well you understand the chapter thoroughly and you go. Dedicate this class where you say, Arey, if I'm sitting with Aishwarya ma'am, rather than nodding off and sleeping off, I will pay attention to her and I will make it a point that I will learn everything. Which is why all I would need is so much from all of you, right? Now, of course, notes, Arey ma'am, notes nahi mil rahe. Notes will be there in the Telegram channel. And in case, right, so this right here, I had requested for some changes from the team, which is why this particular notes that will come to you tomorrow in the Telegram channel, right? So this will come tomorrow, so don't worry about it. Yes? Okay. हम 2 minutes में ready हो जाएंगे. ठीक है, 2 minutes हो जाओ. Yes, and Janmashtami wishes to all of you out there. Yes, all of you. Ma'am, diagram bhi aayenge. Haan, see, I have done a video for important diagrams. How many of you have watched that video? Right? I have made a video separately for all the diagrams, telling you page number, figure number, everything, right? So you can watch that video, but today also I will tell you some of the important diagrams and what all diagrams you can expect. Yes? Ma'am, made notes from the video. Awesome. ठीक है. Okay. Are we all ready? Right? Are we all ready? Now see, again, there are 2 ways in which I'm going to do today's class, right? So let me tell you how I'm going to teach you this topic. Now I will teach you in an aspect that as to what type of questions will come, right? I am not going to come from the angle of teaching you from scratch, right? Which is why I will make it a point that I will tell you on an examination point of view what are all the important things and how we need to go about it. We will not, reproduction chapter will take some time, maybe end of the month, right? Maybe for half yearlies from our end we are not covering. Yes? My name is Aishwarya and thank you Anubhav, but I want you to pay attention in class. Yes? Need your focus. ठीक है. Give reasons. I don't have questions for give reasons, but I'll make up some questions and give it to you. Mock test is coming your way. Everything is coming your way. Yes? So jaldi, don't forget to hit the like button. I should have at least 200 likes on this video. Now it's your responsibility to get it to 200 likes. My hopes and dreams is on you. How many marks? Board exam point of view, few only will come, but half yearlies may you will get more questions, right? Half yearlies may you get a lot of questions from this chapter, which is why we will go jaldi. ठीक है, so we will get started. I will do all your doubts on gigantism and everything I will take. But abhi ke liye we will get started. Now, of course, as we all know, the first chapter, we are just getting started, right? So, as you all know, when you talk about this particular chapter, we know that this first chapter in biology that we studied about was life processes chapter. And what did we learn about life processes? We saw that life processes are basic processes that are essential for life. Yes? And we know that so many different processes are happening at the same time. And all of these processes are necessary for growth. You know, we need for growth, repair, development. Basically, for survival, we require these processes. Now, what do you think about plants, right? We know that all these life processes that we discussed, side by side, we also discussed about plants. And we know that whether it is nutrition, whether it's energy production, we all know that end of the day, that is also contributing towards the growth, right? So, we also see that growth is something that takes place in plants, right? Now, in all these cases, when you say a plant is growing, right? How will you say a plant is growing? You will say that, ma'am, plant is growing because plant is showing some movement where it is increasing in height. So similarly, if you tell me, right, if you tell me, ma'am, you are growing, right, or you are not growing, you will say, ma'am, you are not growing because you are so short and you have not increased in height. There is no movement that is happening, right? So here there is some kind of movement that is happening. But there are some times where some movements which are not really related to growth, right? For example, if you have somebody who's ever tried skateboarding, or rather than giving such a fancy example of skateboarding, normally when you play football, like if you are into sports, you play football, basketball, or if you play any kind of sport, any kind of dance, right? In all of these cases, none of the movements you are doing. If I am doing all this, that's not related to me growing in any way. But I need to make sure that different parts of my body is working together in order for me to do the movement. So we say that there are some functions, I could say. So if I were to summarize all of this, see that there are some functions which we don't really put a lot of thought. Right now when you are talking to me, you're not really putting a lot of thought, right? You're like, "Arey ma'am, I want to talk to you, I want to ask this. Let me just ask you this," right? Or if you say, okay, right now I feel thirsty, fine, you're not thinking too much, you're just picking up the bottle, you're drinking water, right? So there are a lot of activities which we perform for which there's not a lot of thought going into it, but somehow it happens. And similarly, internally also within our body, so many activities are happening for which you are not thinking. You're not thinking, oh my God, my heart has to pump blood, so wait, let me make my heart pump blood. You are not thinking that, oh my God, my food has to go from stomach to intestine right now because 4 hours is over after it's been 4 hours since food is there in my stomach. Now it has to go to my small intestine. You are not putting any kind of thought, right? This is why we see that there are some activities wherein so many different parts are coming together, right? So many different parts are coming together and they are working together, or I can say that they are coordinating with each other, right? So when 2 or more organs interact and complement the functions of one another, we say that this is what we understand as coordination. Why is coordination important? That is something that will come, right? Because this will help us or it will help us work in an efficient manner. So whether that is internal processes happening within our body or whether it was external when I am coordinating with my surroundings. If I am coordinating with my dance team to dance, it is also something that's happening, right? So simply put, what is coordination? We have a coordinating system. A coordination is basically when organs work towards each other or they work together, right? We see that we work together so that we are able to achieve a certain activity efficiently, right? And within our body, we have coordinating systems that help our various organ systems coordinate with each other, and also we are able to coordinate with our surroundings. Are we clear? We don't just coordinate internally, we coordinate externally as well. And all of this happens because of a coordinating system. Now, what are my coordinating systems? I have two types of coordinating systems, right? Can you all tell me in the live chat right now, what are my coordinating systems? Does my body have a single coordinating system or does my body have two coordinating systems? Internally as well as externally, I am able to do. Yes? Okay. I'm waiting for this answer. I want to know what answer I'm going to get. I'm getting, okay, people who are telling me to elaborate on that too, right? Elaborate on what you understand as coordinating systems. Yes? See, when I talk about coordination, there are two types of coordination. Will you just tell me CNS and PNS? No. CNS and PNS is there, but coordinating systems in my body is not just a nervous coordination that happens, but my body also does chemical coordination, right? Which is why in this case we see that we have nervous coordination and chemical coordination that happens. Now in nervous coordination, what do we see? It is my coordinating system which is utilizing some electrical signaling, right? So with the help of some electrical signals, my body is able to control its functioning. While in chemical coordination, what do we see? We see that some chemicals are involved. Now we will also understand why we require two coordinating systems and why can't we just have only one? Why is my body struggling and building two coordinating systems? We will understand that in detail. So first, in order to understand that contrast, we need to first understand about the first coordinating system, which is a nervous coordination, right? Now we know that nervous coordination is of course done with the help of some electrical signaling, and this nervous coordination is taken care of by the nervous system that controls and coordinates various functions of the body. Now let's understand this with a simple example. Now can you tell me what is happening here? This is a very cliche example we biology teachers love giving you, right? To give you a easy, simple understanding. What is happening right here? Rather than me telling you this is a definition, this is the example, this is the statement, you will now start observing. Today my class is going to be a little bit more oriented towards observation so that you remember better. Burning, observe, don't give me technical. Ma'am, mujhe nerve problem. Oh, okay. That is breathing. Yes, Akshara, I will tell you. Please, let's break the mystery now. When I do that part, I'll take that down. Hand is, you don't give me the biological aspect. You tell me what you're seeing. That's it. Hand is getting burnt. That's all. Guys, simple. She's touching this. She's taken her hand off. So now, because it was very hot, right? Now, we observe two steps happening here. One is she is sensing that something is hot. Now, first of all, it's not within her body, it's outside, right? So, we see that something is hot on the outside. She is able to sense it and she takes an action immediately, that is to withdraw her hand, right? So, this right here, this hot object is something which is an agent, right? So, we see that it is an external. In this case, it is an external agent. Now, what did it do? This hot object brought about a change, right? It made me bring about a change in my body. And what was my change? My change was to pull my hand away, right? So this right here is what we call as a stimulus and a response. So stimulus that is there is basically any change. Now this change, for the example that I gave you, is an external change. But stimulus is not always external. Stimulus is also internal, right? So external or internal change that in the environment that brings about a response. Now internal change, I'm talking within my body, right? That's what I mean by internal change, right? So we see that it is stimulus is any change in the external or internal environment that brings about a response. Then what is this response? The response is any behavior of a living organism that results from an external or internal change, right? Now internal how? Think about it. Now in your body, you have various activities that are taking place, right? So let's assume a simple activity. Let's say it is the contraction, or it is the, let's talk about maybe movement of food down the alimentary canal, right? Now this movement of food, if it has to go from one place to another, if the sphincter muscles, if it has to go from stomach to intestine, there has to be some, there has to be some signaling that needs to be there, right? So we see that those are some internal changes that is communicated to our body, saying that, hey, my food has to go from stomach to intestine. That is what we mean by that. You can all take a screenshot. Arey, feedback mechanism I will teach you. Can you please tell me your name? What is this toxic as ever? What are these names? You all tell me your real names, no? How will I say? I will tell you the answer toxic as ever. I feel so bad. Username also you put some interesting ones, no? Ma'am, आप थोड़ा fast जा रहे हो, थोड़ा slow कर दीजिए, ठीक है? Introduction only. Introduction. So far we are good, no? We know what is nerve, we know what is coordination now. We know that there is different types of movement, right? So we've understood the basics of it. No, we've understood basics. So far I've just introduced the concept to all of you. There is a stimulus, and half the time you'll ask me what is stimulus. Stimulus here, of course, we know that stimulus is basically any internal or external. It's basically a change that happens that results in a response. Now response is a behavior that is there, right? Now we see that this stimulus and response, which means that if there's a change taking place and if I'm responding towards it, these things that we see are what we call, or these are coordinated by my nervous system. Okay? Yes. Thank you, Pavitra. Thank you so much. Reflex, everything I will teach you. First, basics, right? Basics. Now, we will talk about nervous system. Yes? Now, let me tell you something, right? Now, let me tell you another thing. Now, when you talk about a nervous system, so whenever you hear the word system, right? So whenever you hear the word system, you know that we are talking about a organ system, right? Or it is made up of various cells which are put together, right? So in this case, when we talk about a nervous system, let's go back a little bit to grade 9, right? In grade 9, we learned that there is a type of tissue called as nervous tissue. Do we all remember this? We have a type of tissue which is called as nervous tissue. And here, of course, we know that nervous tissue is nothing but made up of a bundle of neurons, which means what is a neuron? Neuron is basically the structural and fundamental unit of the nervous system. Students, neuron ka structure function is very, very important, right? Very, very important on an examination point of view, right? So this right here is important. Now, neurons that are there are of differing lengths, but there are some neurons which are very long, right? So they are very long and they are elongated cells, yes? So let's have a look at the structure of the neuron. Now, if you look at it, neuron that is there is basically like a tree. It's as simple, right? Just like how you draw a tree, we see that it is like a tree only. It has a branched like structure. So there are two parts to the neuron. We see that the neuron has a cell body, which is also called as cyton, right? So if I use the word cyton and cell body interchangeably, it is nothing but it is the cell body. Now the cell body has a prominent nucleus, and we see that there are small, and of course it has cytoplasm and some granules which are there. Then on the other hand, from the cell body, we observe that there are some projections which go outwards, right? So we see that there are some projections, some cytoplasmic projections like this, which we call as dendrites. Now dendrite is plural, dendron is singular, right? Dendron is singular. Now we see that one such long extension that is there is what we call as the axon. Now the axon can have a insulating protection, right? So we see that it can have a covering like this, which is called as a myelin sheath. What is the role of myelin sheath? It is insulation, or it is a insulating sheath. And we see that there are points here called as node of Ranvier, right? So there are these points at which it becomes discontinuous, right? So the myelin sheath, we see that there are certain points which are present, which is called as the node of Ranvier, right? So these are certain points we see, and they end in these bulb-like structures called as axon terminals, nerve endings, all of this. What is the role of myelin sheath? It is an insulating sheath. That means that first and foremost, we know that in a especially when it comes to nerves, right, which is made up of a bundle of axons, we see that there is no intermixing of nerve electrical impulses, right? So we see that in order to prevent any intermixing of electrical impulses, it is protected by that sheath. Yes? Yes, it is also called as soma. The cell body is also called as soma. Nerve and nerve fiber. See, nerve and nerve fiber are, see, when you talk about it, the term nerve, it could also mean, if you say nerve cell, it's also neuron, right? Nerve fiber could also refer to the nervous tissue that is there. Yes? Awesome. Now, of course, this is the basic structure that is there, right? What is the use of node of Ranvier? See, they are basically points at which the impulse jumps, right? So, they are basically points at which the impulse jumps. That's all as that, okay? Ma'am, why are there several small neurons instead of one large neuron to maximize the transmission, right? So, see, again we have, let me get to that point of transmission. I'll answer some of the questions, but some of the questions are a little ahead of me explaining it, right? So, now of course, we see that this is a neuron. Now, we know that information that is there, we see that information in the nervous system is done through electrical signaling, right? And we just learned that it is responsible for nervous coordination. That means it helps us coordinate with our surroundings and coordinate internally. So how do they coordinate? Now, if you and I have to coordinate in a project, right? So imagine our teacher has given you and me one project and our teacher has said, listen, you need to do this project together. How will you and I divide the work? You and I will talk to each other and we'll say, okay, you take the part on hormonal control, I'll take the part on nervous control, and we will make our project, right? So in this case, communication is necessary. So when I say electrical signaling, it means that this is the way they communicate or they pass on the information. So that information that needs to be passed on, right? That, hey, this is what happened on the outside. This is the response that you have to take. That communication is done with the help of electrical signaling that is passed on. It's basically like a game of Chinese whisper. No, it gets passed on from one neuron to the other. And this is what we call as transmission of nerve impulse. So basically, simply put, it is how we receive or we process, right? So if my body has to say that this thing is hot, how is it that my body is recognizing that this is hot and I am withdrawing my hand? It is as simple as that, right? So in this case, we see that how does my body realize that something is hot? So we see that we are able to receive a stimulus, or I will use another word which is perceive, right? So to perceive means to understand, right? Or to figure out that, hey, this thing is hot, right? So that information that is there, we receive it with the help of some specialized cells called as receptors. And we see that receptors are structures present in our sense organs. Very good. So what are receptors? Receptors that are there are nothing but they are specialized cells that have the ability to perceive a stimulus, right? So we see that they are present in our sense organs. I am going to take your questions. Most of it I'm about to explain right now. So we see that in our skin we have various types of receptors. One type of it is thermoreceptor, where I'm able to detect temperature. We see that we have photoreceptors in our eyes that is able to detect light. We have olfactory receptors which is present in our nose that helps us smell things. Then I have a phonoreceptor or auditory receptors which is there in my ear that helps me detect sound. Gustatory receptors which help me detect taste, right? So we see that there are various receptors that are there. Now what happens is that these receptors, they have the ability to, they have the ability to recognize the stimulus. So what is their job? Recognize the stimulus. Once they recognize, they pass on the information, right? So information, when it gets passed on, we see that it is the dendrites, right? So we see that the dendrites are the ones which receive the information. And then it is passed on to the cyton of the neuron, through which it will go through the entire length of the axon, and then it will reach the end, that is the axon terminal. Now this is of course one neuron. Now if you see, let me call this as neuron 1. Now it has to go from neuron 1 to neuron 2. So how is it going from neuron 1 to neuron 2? Is it that all the neurons are connected to each other? Are they all, glued together? They are not glued together. understand that between two neurons, right, we see that there is a fine gap that is present between the axon terminal of one neuron and the dendritic end of the other, right? And this fine gap that you see is what we call as axon, right? So it is a fine gap. And we see that from here the impulse will go, it will reach the dendrite and the same flow, right? So we have dendrite, cyton, axon, nerve ending. So this is something that you will need to know. Now quickly I'm going to stop here to ask you, right, if you are clear so far. Ma'am, why is it that neurons are not connected to each other? Neurons are not connected to each other because if you see, the information through the neuron is in the form of electrical impulse, right? So we see that they are in the form of electrical impulses. But once it reaches the ending, we see that that's where it stops. So we see that there is a need where there is a change or a conversion to a chemical information and then it will become electrical again, right? So I'll explore that a little bit more. But so far, are we clear? Are we clear on transmission? Ma'am, the gap is synapse. The gap is the synapse. Synapse is the fine gap between what and what. That is what you need to know, right? See, if you're clear with the introduction, I'm mainly starting the important parts right now. You can quickly take a screenshot, students. Ma'am, it should be synapse, not axon, right? See, at the synapse is where the chemical information goes, right? That is where. Ma'am, you have written axon. Oh, sorry. This is synapse. My bad, my bad. I said synapse and I wrote axon. Sorry. Are we done? No problem, Mihika, you can watch from now, right? Ma'am, are sensory neurons and receptors the same? More or less, they are. More or less, they are, AV. Effector, coming to it, right? Notes will be provided. Neuromuscular junction, I'm about to discuss that. What is a synapse? All of that. See, Akshara, let me give you a better example, right? Akshara has a question that, ma'am, okay, external stimulus, I understand how the information is passed. But what is an example of an internal stimulus, right? Why can't you give me a better example for internal stimulus? Now, let me give you an example. Now, in internal stimulus, I'm sure when we learned about when we learned about the excretory system, we learned about the urinary bladder, right? We have all learned about the urinary bladder, which is responsible for storing urine for a brief period of time, right? So in this case, what happens? We know that in the urinary bladder, urine can be stored for a brief period of time. But there comes a point when it is full, right? And it needs to be expelled. Now, who is responsible for this? We know that this right here, urethra, we know that there are certain sphincter muscles also. Now, if these sphincter muscles have to relax, right? If they have to relax and the urine has to be expelled, information will be passed. There are various ways to detect this electrical impulse, right? That is complicated, for which we will not go into details. But this is an example of an internal stimulus, right? Are we good to go? Are we all clear now? Akshara, I hope we are clear with this, right? So this is the transmission of nerve impulses. Internal bleeding could be one, right? If there are wounds and everything, there are messages which are sent, right? Anxiousness. See, especially when it comes to anxiety, and those are a little bit complicated neural pathways which are still being studied, right? So we're still learning about it, which is why I will not sort of give you a concrete answer, because anxiousness, why do people respond a different way in certain cases, like maybe obsessive behaviors that they have, right? So all of that is still being studied. So neuroscience is a very vast field. These are basically some basics that we can conclude and say that this is it, right? Tomorrow you never know. Tomorrow things could change as well. So that is one thing you need to know. Ma'am, how do receptors work? They have basically specialized cells that can detect. So there will be a chemical change which will eventually result in generating an electric impulse, right? Yes. Ma'am, how does electronic impulse get converted to electrical? We will see, right? So now we see that we know that this is the pathway. But there is one thing we observe, that if this is my axonal ending and this is going to be, say, my dendrite, right? We see that there is a fine gap. Now what happens is that inside my axonal endings, there are some structures, there are some vesicles, okay, where some chemical substances are stored. So vesicles are basically sac-like structures inside some chemicals are stored. Now what are these chemicals inside? They are going to be your neurotransmitters, right? So we see that we have something called as neurotransmitter. Now neurotransmitter is not something that is there exactly in your textbook, so you don't need to worry about it. But in this particular case, one thing you need to understand is that there are these neurotransmitters. So when your electric impulse will reach here, no? After this, your electric impulse is not going to go till dendrite. Now here it will now push your neurotransmitter to go outside, right? So we see that here it will push your neurotransmitter to go outside. And these neurotransmitters are what will get released in the synapse, right? So neurotransmitters are chemical substances which are found in the axon terminals that are released when the signal comes till the end, right? And from here they are the ones which are released. Now the dendrites, if you see, they have some special structures that can recognize. They're like, hey, neurotransmitter is coming, right? So it's kind of like if we send, imagine if some, like Morse code, right? It's kind of like Morse code. How many of you know Morse code, where you know you put flashlight like this and based on it you're able to understand? It's kind of like that. Okay, not like that, that's a bad example. So it is kind of like a letter. I'll go back to my example. So it is kind of like posting a letter. So letter will have an address and it will come to your house because that is your address, right? So here the neurotransmitters will come. Dendrites have the ability to recognize the neurotransmitter. Now once they recognize it, from here we see that because of the chemical change. So these are all chemical changes that are happening, because of which an electric impulse will be there. Okay? Yes. Are we clear? Arey, what is happening? Sometimes pain is what is needed. Hey, no pain. Everything will be good. Vesicles, Ashwini, they are going to be packed in vesicles. They are sac-like structures. Okay? Should we learn types of stimuli, Zimra? In your textbook and in NCRT, they have asked about gustatory, olfactory, which is mentioned in NCRT also. So please learn that. Okay? Naman, line mat maro, abhi class mein padho. You listen to me. All this is line marrowing and all you do later. Example of neurotransmitter, acetylcholine, right? Acetylcholine. Nissel granules are structures which we find inside the cyton, right? Okay. Ma'am, what is that red blob? Oh, I'll tell you. Very good, very good. Once more. See, in this particular case, all you need to know is on signal transmission. So we know that the receptors are the ones which recognize the stimulus from the outside, right? And they will generate an electric impulse. Now, how does the impulse travel? So we see that the dendrites are the ones which perceive or they carry the information. It goes to cyton. From cyton, it goes to axon. And from axon, it will reach the terminal or the axon terminal, nerve ending, whatever you want to call it. Now what happens is that at the terminal there is a fine gap which is called as a synapse, right? So this right here, there's a fine gap which we call as synapse. Now at the synapse what happens? It's not in the form of electric signals anymore. Now some chemicals are released which we call as neurotransmitters, right? So neurotransmitters are released here. So what are neurotransmitters? Basically they are the ones which carry the information. They carry it from the neuron 1 and they will carry it to neuron 1 to neuron 2. Yes? Easy peasy. Now, good question, Kumar. Ma'am, synapse is what? And how is neuromuscular junction different? See, synapse is a fine junction. I'll write the definition down once again. Now, you don't ask me to write it again. Synapse is a fine gap that exists, right? That exists between what? Axon terminal. Now, you all write this definition down in your textbook. Later on, don't ask me this. Or later on, you ask me, it's okay, but you should remember, no, when I'm writing it down, you write it along with me, right? Axon terminal of one neuron and dendritic end, right? So dendritic end of the other neuron. Yes? Now how is a neuromuscular junction different? Now information is not always going to go from neuron to neuron. At one point it will reach the end point where the action has to be carried out. So if our stimulus was heat, right, and our thermoreceptors perceived the information, now it will go, information will go, information will get processed. Now we know what we need to do, right? Okay, some action has to be taken. Now what is my action? I need to take my hand down. So if I have to take my hand away, my muscles have to do the work. My neuron will not do anything. Neuron is only responsible for talking and communicating. So my muscles have to do the work, no? So some neuron has to tell my muscle, bro, you contract and take your hand off. Only then we will be able to do, right? So at this point, the gap or the junction between neuron and muscle, that is what we call as neuromuscular junction, right? So we see that neuromuscular junction is the gap or the synapse that exists between muscle and neuron. What is a synapse otherwise? So synapse here is going to be a fine gap. Now I have a question for all of you. How many of you understood? Ma'am, kindly go in detail. How many of you have not understood? Tell me yes or no. I just want yes or no. Because if you tell me me, I'll not know. So yes or no only. Understood. No, ma'am. No, many no's. Yes. Oh, now many yes. Ma'am, only muscles receive the signals. Most often muscles receive it because you have so many types of muscle. You have skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, mainly muscles, and also you have your glands also. Not clear. ठीक है, not a problem. Can you tell me which part is not clear? Can you tell me that aspect? Which part of it is not clear for you? I will go once again. Which part is not clear? और पूरा का पूरा एक revision किया जाए because so many no's are there. Students, for our other friends, for those of you who understood, probably will be like, "Arey ma'am, ho gaya abhi, but you're still teaching." But I'm going to do this for our other friends who are still struggling a little bit with the concept, right? So let's understand this once more, right? Let's understand this once more. Full revision. I still have the rest of the chapter left. I'm very worried that I'll not finish on time. Ek aur baar, I'm going to do it for our friends, others. Please be patient, right? Now let's take an example that this is me, okay? This is Aishu ma'am. And what happened to Aishu ma'am? Aishu ma'am has very smartly gone and touched a candle which has fire. Okay? I have gone and I have nicely touched it. Now, this I will zoom into it. Okay? This is my finger. This is flame. Candle. Okay? Now, next what we are going to do, very smart I am, no? Now this is what I've gone and touched. So this is what is on the outside. It is some external agent, no? So it is something on the external. Now because I've gone and touched it, we see that some change I will do. Now what I'll do when I touch, I will withdraw my hand, right? So here basically what is going to happen, end scenario is what I'm going to draw now. See, I'm being full creative, okay? After this, if you tell, ma'am, samajh mein nahi aaya, I'm going to be very worried. Now, my next one is going to be that I will take my hand away. So, this is my end goal. End mein, this is what I should do, right? End, what I need to do is take away my finger, right? So, this is what I will call as my response. This is my end goal. This is my response. This is my end goal. Now, how is it that this action of touching and moving my hand took place? So we see that when I touched this, basically when I touched, don't go till reflex action, I've not even reached that part yet. So if you see here, this is the stimulus, right? This is my external agent. Now at the tip of my finger, I see that there are some specialized cells, okay? Let's call this cell, this is a specialized cell that is there. Now this specialized cell has realized that, hey, she has done this. So what has happened? These specialized cells which can understand or which can perceive my stimulus. So they are the ones which can identify. So I will draw this. Oh, she has gone and touched it. So as you can see, these receptors are cells, right, which have the ability to perceive it. Now from here, what this receptor will do? This receptor will go and tell this neuron, right? So now there is going to be this neuron, okay? And it is going to tell this neuron, okay, that hey, she has done some really smart thing. She's gone and touched fire directly. So now what will happen? This information will be received by which part? The dendrites that are there, right? So we see that it will be received all the way from the dendrites. From dendrites, where will it go? It will go to the cyton. From cyton, where will it go? It will go to axon. From axon, it will reach the last part, which is going to be the axon terminal. Now it has reached the end of one neuron. But our body does not have one neuron. Our body has many neurons, right? So when many neurons are there, what will happen? We see that the next part or the neuron is arranged one after the other, right? Neurons are arranged one after the other. So from here, if I move the label, we see that the dendritic end of the other neuron, right? So I'm just drawing one neuron like this. So this is my neuron 2. So we see that this is the dendritic end, right? So we see that this is the dendritic end. Now we see that the information, so there is a fine gap that exists here. This fine gap is what we call as synapse, which is present between axon terminal, no? And it is present between dendrite. Are we all clear? So information will go now in this direction all the way here. But what should happen? Ultimately, all whatever neurons are there, it needs to reach my muscles, my hand ka muscle, no? It has to reach hand ka muscle. So here if you see, it will reach all the way till my muscles. They'll be like, yo bro, you got to do some work. You need to contract. So we see that the gap that exists, so very badly drawn, but the gap that exists between the axon end and the muscle is what we call as neuromuscular junction. Now are we clear? I have drawn some crazy horrible doodling, but I hope we are clear now. Yes? Ma'am, breathing and blinking can't be controlled. I will come to that part. But you get the basic. Yes? Phospholipid. Phospholipid is basically phosphate and lipid layer which is found in cell. Ma'am, are receptors, right? Receptors, effector, no. So receptor is the specialized cell, right? While the person who is doing, right? The person who is doing the action. So here who is doing my action of withdrawing my hand? It is my muscle, right? So my muscle here is the effector organ. So the person who is doing my activity is going to be my effector, right? Kumar, you ask control coordination doubts, okay? Ma'am, there are some conditions where we cannot. Okay, I missed that doubt. Ma'am, does muscle accept only chemical impulse? An end means the neurotransmitter passing the information, no? So yes. Are we clear? You want to take a screenshot? Yes, you are right. Ma'am, is there any function of node of Ranvier? They basically increase the pace at which the impulse are transmitted. Axon terminal and muscle is known as neuromuscular. The game, not game, the gap. Gap is what we call. Ma'am, how does it know we exist? Some deep questions are coming for which I don't know answers. Effector definition. I'll write it down and you can take a screenshot, right? You answered glans also, but what about when it is the eye? Eye may also, Akshara, if you remember when Saurabh sir has taken human eye and the colorful world, in human eye, what is the reflex? You have movement of pupil, you have movement, basically the change in size of pupil as light and dark adaptation, you have movement of lenses, you have ciliary muscles and all of that involved. So basically it's muscles at the end of the day, right? Yes. We need questions. We have all revised. Okay, I will go a little faster. Don't worry. Effector that is there is basically an organ or a muscle that carries out a function or carries out the response. Students who want to take a screenshot jaldi. Kumar, don't spam bacha. There are many others who have doubts. You be nice. You had doubts. I explained it to you. What about others? They should also learn, no? Yes. Now Now, many of you are asking very out of syllabus questions also. I'm just saying, okay, so much will not come. Are we done? Shall I move on? Okay, let's go on. So in the end, if you see, muscles are able to carry out the action because they have special contractile proteins that have the ability to sort of contract and relax, right? So this is what we understand as the neuromuscular junction and ultimately contraction and relaxation. Now we see that in our body we have three types of neurons. We have sensory neuron, relay neuron and motor neuron, okay? Now sensory neurons are the neurons which we find in the sense organs, right? Or we can say that they are the ones which carry information from sense organs, right? So they carry the information from the sensory organs all the way till the brain or the spinal cord, right? So they are the ones which carry information all the way from the sense organs. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, वहीं से information जाके लेके जाके they will give it to your brain and spinal cord, right? Sana, after live video, comments. Then you have something called as relay neuron or interneuron, which connects your sensory and motor neurons. And the information that I told you, that finally somebody has to tell my muscles what to do, that is done by my motor neurons, which carries impulses from the brain and the spinal cord to maybe different parts of my body, right? So now I told you that there is information going to brain and spinal cord. So what exactly is my brain and spinal cord doing? Now if you look at my nervous system, right? Whenever I say nervous system, you will say brain. Because brain is the main control center of our body, right? The brain is such a beautiful organ, you have no idea that we're still studying. And the branch of neuroscience is still making a lot of discoveries because the way our brain works, the way it does various activities, we are still studying. So to be honest, there are so many questions that you might ask me for which I will not give you a conclusive answer because there's still a lot of research happening in those fields, right? Which is why if you see, the brain and the spinal cord together make up a large part of our nervous system, right? And they in turn are made up of various neurons that are put together. Now we say that the brain and the spinal cord make up the central nervous system. Now why do I say that the brain? Vishwaj, brain is a part of CNS, right? Which is called as central nervous system. Why is it why do we say that brain and spinal cord is a part of central nervous system? Because where is the brain present? It's present in our head region. Where is the spinal cord present? Again, in the center of our body, right? So if you look at the positioning of these parts, we see that they are in the center, hence central nervous system. Now on the other hand, we have peripheral nervous system. Now your peripheral nervous system are made up of nerves. And we know what are nerves. Nerves are basically nervous tissue which are made up of many neurons put together. And these nerves are normally found in the periphery on either side of the central nervous system. Don't worry, I will teach you all about you. I know you will come with ANSP and SS, somatic nervous system. So many is going to come my way. I will do it when I handle peripheral nervous system. So first we will learn about our central nervous system, okay? Now why are neurons of different shapes? We see that there are neurons of different shapes and different types to carry out functions effectively. Why the name peripheral? Because they are found in the periphery or on the side of the central nervous system, hence peripheral nervous system. Yes? So first we will do brain, and how about we do brain and spinal cord and we take a short break. We will do brain and spinal cord and we will take a short break, 5 minutes water break, and then we will continue with the rest. How does the plan look like? That sounds good, no? Today I already told you. Yes, I will give you a break. Otherwise you'll be like, Mom, sab upar ja raha hai. Oh my God, I can't. Don't worry. Yes. Date sheet you will get soon, but dates are out. Dates are out. Okay. So first we'll have a look at the brain, right? Now see, brain there is the main coordinating center of our body, right? And like I told you, brain there is a beautiful organ which we are still studying. So what are the things that we can conclusively say? Now, brain, of course, is found in our head region, right? It's there. It is protected by. We say that it is protected by the skull, and specifically the part of the skull. See, now you'll ask me, ma'am, what is skull and what is this? I'll tell you. So, skull is basically the bones that come together and they make up the face region. But we see that there are a set of bones which specifically protect our brain, and that is what we call as the cranium or the bone box, right? Brain box. Sorry. So we also call this as the brain box, which is a hard, bony, protective covering which protects the brain. Now, apart from this, what do we see? We also see that in this particular case, it is also having a membranous protection, right? So we see that the brain has a membranous protection, or it is protected by a membrane called as meninges. So cranium is what you see here, right? So this part which I am coloring in red is what is your cranium. But the part that I have highlighted in black, right? The part that I have highlighted in black, that is your meninges, right? Meninges is not there in the syllabus, so don't worry. So meninges that is there is a membranous covering. It is a membrane-like structure, like a sheet-like structure which covers it. And yes, it has 3 layers. Now, between these layers, very good Nitika, very good. Now, between this, right, we see that between this, we see that there is a fluid which is present, which we call as cerebrospinal fluid. Now, this cerebrospinal fluid that is there is found in the hollow spaces, and of course, we know that it absorbs shock and provides nutrients, right? So, we see that these are the functions. Sanskriti, that's a very good question. I will answer it maybe after I finish teaching brain. I hope you are okay with that, right? Now, Ashwini, you asked me, ma'am, what if they ask, what is the protective covering? So, if they ask you what is the protective covering, they will be specific. What is the bony protective covering? If the word bony comes anywhere, the word bone, bony, hard, rigid, if these words that denote, bones come into the picture, you have to write cranium. But if they ask you membranous covering, which is very rare, but if they ask you membranous covering, then you can say meninges. But normally they'll ask you what is the rigid protective covering, right? So normally we say that as per NCERT, if you go, it will definitely be cranium only, because meninges I don't think is mentioned as per this one, right? So this is all about cerebrospinal fluid. Now, cranium is there, and of course, we see that cerebrospinal fluid is there as well. Ma'am, ye meninges has 3 layers. Yes, Vishwaj, it has 3 layers. And cerebrospinal fluid will absorb shock. So, when you fall down, there can be shocks, right? Those vibrations that can go and reach the brain, and they could affect or harm your brain, right? So, all those shocks need to be absorbed so that it doesn't go and it affects our brain. That is why we see that this right here is there. Sahej bachcha nahi hoga brain ka diagram, they will not ask you. See, board exam mein at least it is not going to come in the, it will not come for drawing. Labeling will come. Yes? Okay. Are we clear? You want to take a screenshot? Cosmotalk, CFS is produced by certain parts of the brain only. There are certain special cells that are there which is present in the brain. Ma'am, doesn't it flow? No, it is not like it's not like blood which is flowing and circulating. It is just present in between. So just like if you know, in your kneecap, you have something called a synovial fluid, right? That fluid is actually not going anywhere. It's just there as a lubricant, okay? Okay, now we will go on to more about the brain. Now, let me tell you that the brain that is there is made up of various networks, right? I mean, what do you say? Various neurons that are there. And we know that there are so many different kinds of neurons that come together and they make up the structure of the brain. Now, of course, arrangement of neurons, we see that it's slightly different, but I'm not going into too much technicalities of it. Now, if you look at it, the brain can be divided and categorized in various ways. But here, based on the position, we can categorize, or we can say that brain has 3 parts, right? Now, how am I saying these 3 parts? Based on the position of these parts, right? So, these 3 parts include forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain, right? So, we have forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. We will do reflex action when we understand central nervous system first. It will be easy, right? Now, forebrain that is there is the front part of your brain, right? It is the fore part or the front part. Now, it mainly includes cerebrum and it includes your thalamus and hypothalamus, right? Now, these are the three parts. Now, this cerebrum that is there is the largest part of your brain. And we see that this cerebrum has two hemispheres or two sides, right? So we call one side as the right hemisphere and one as the left hemisphere. So it has two parts that are there. Yes? Now this cerebrum, if you see, we see that this cerebrum or these two hemispheres are connected to each other, not like they're just doing their own things, right? They are also connected to each other with the help of a fibrous structure called as corpus callosum, right? So these are some labelings which are mentioned in your textbook that I am elaborating. So the two hemispheres of the cerebrum are connected to each other with the help of corpus callosum, right? Now I will tell you the parts, don't worry. Now we have midbrain which is normally present in the middle region, okay? So this right here, I'm just going to move it and I'll point this label a little bit to this part. So this right here is where your middle brain is located, right? This whole region you could say is your middle brain. And then you have your hind brain. So your middle brain is the part that connects your forebrain and hind brain. And hind brain is present in the back region. Now in the hind brain you have pons, cerebellum and medulla oblongata. Yes? So let's understand this one by one. Now first and foremost we have the forebrain which has cerebrum. Now exam point of view may, let me tell you one thing on an examination point of view, when you look at it, functions of these parts are important, right? Functions are very, very important. They can come for assertion reason, they can come for MCQs, right? Or they can come for 2 marks. So functions are very, very important. Everything else is okay. Now we are only going to do on a board examination front, right? Or half yearly front. So this is what you need to know. Now if you look at the function of cerebrum, right? We see that the forebrain that is there is the main thinking part of the brain, right? So we see that it is the main thinking part, right? Which sees that it receives a lot of impulses from sense organs, right? Or we see that it receives a lot of information from sense organs, from various receptors. Now different parts of my cerebrum, right? So different parts of my cerebrum is specialized. So there will be one part which is specialized for understanding smell. There is one part which is responsible for understanding vision. There's one part which is responsible for hearing, right? So we see that this right here, we see that there are separate parts which are allocated in the cerebrum that will carry out all these important things, right? And along with that, we see that there's a place where all information gets interpreted also, right? So we see that at the end of the day, thinking, various sensory activities are controlled right here. Now, apart from that, we also see that various voluntary actions are controlled, right? So we're talking about a very important thing. Now, the actions that we do or movement that we do, we know that actions that are there, some can be controlled by us, right? There are some actions which can be controlled by us, some which cannot be controlled, right? So we see that there are some which cannot be controlled. So actions which can be controlled. For example, what? Right now I am talking to you, right? I am talking to you right now because I want to talk to you. If I don't want to talk to you, I will not talk to you. So I am controlling the movement of my mouth. Now here we see that in this case, right, we see that this is what we call as voluntary actions, right? So we see that these are what we call as voluntary actions. While on the other hand, there are some which we cannot control, which is what we call as involuntary. Now this right here is what some we cannot control. For example, the way our heart beats or the way the food moves, right? So this all are involuntary. Now if Akshara is still here, she asked me a question, right? Ma'am, when we talk about breath, right? When we talk about breathing, now especially if you all have done swimming, right? If you have done swimming, you know that there are times when you'll have to control your breath underwater, right? So you'll have to control breath underwater. But if you see, breathing is often said to be involuntary. Then how can you control it? Is it really voluntary or involuntary? I am sure that you must have this doubt. How many of you wonder whether breathing is actually voluntary or involuntary? Yes, very good. Karnataka board can also study this, right? Very good, very good. So, see, I don't know how to swim, right? I'm very bad. If I swim, I think I will definitely drown, right? Very good, Team 7 guy. Arey, I have not seen your messages for so long. I thought you were not here. See, blinking of eyes, that's also another example. Now, broadly, they are involuntary, right? So, they are involuntary actions only. But this brief period of time when we can control them, right? The brief period of time when we can control our breath underwater. Like even right now, if I hold my breath, right? I can hold it for some time, but after a point, I cannot do that, right? So for that brief period of time, I'm able to control some parts of my body. Like for example, there is some control. Now, how is that possible? That is not possible when you do it for the first time, right? Now, let me tell you one more thing, right? One more thing is that the nerve impulses, right? The information that goes. This is little higher order, so if you don't understand, it's okay. But in our body, for every action that we do, there is a set path that is done by there's a set path by which the nerve impulse will transport, right? Or through which it will pass. So if this is the route, right? This is how the nerve impulse will pass. But when you do something which is not normal or not usual, your neuron impulse will reroute. So what is basically happening is eventually when you are swimming, you are practicing and you are controlling your breath underwater for how much ever brief period that is there. That is because you are training your body and thereby your body is rerouting the information. Okay, that is what happens. But does not mean that breathing becomes voluntary. Breathing is still mainly involuntary, right? Ma'am, small child can do this. When you do this for the first time, do you think you will do it properly? How many of you remember your first swimming class? When you fall inside the water for the first time, do you really think that you will be able to control your breath? But if you keep practicing swimming, if I have swimmers in my class today, you will be able to tell me. The more you keep going for swimming class, the more and more you do, the more your body gets trained, right? The more your body will get trained and thereby you are able to do this, right? Weight of... Ma'am, anxiety and other feelings, are they involuntary? See, feelings in general, the concept of feelings, right? That is controlled by another part called amygdala. And we know that there are again various routings, various chemicals which are involved in all of that. So you cannot generalize that, right? So those are very different. Okay, I know. But when you overcome fear, that is when your body feels more challenged. Your mind feels challenged, right? Yes, I know I've done a short on amygdala also. You can watch that. Now moving on, there are some questions like how Aquarius is asking me, right? Ma'am, does the weight of the brain decrease or increase? I'll tell you that. Let me just finish. Yes. Now midbrain. Sahej is asking me, ma'am, midbrain kya hai? See, midbrain is basically a connecting part, right? So if you look at it structurally, we see that the midbrain that is there is a small tubular part. It is a small tubular part that connects your forebrain and hindbrain. It's a small part. And what does it do? It controls the reflexes of the eye. Now, what do I mean by reflexes of the eye? For example, you know, when dust particles fall inside your eye, what would you do? You will blink very fast to get rid of it. Tears start getting produced rapidly. No? And then similarly, what will happen? We see that sometimes when you are in a dark room and you walk outside and it's so bright, what will you do? You're like, arey, I can't, right? Because your body has to take some time to adjust. So as you can see, dilation of pupils or constriction and dilation. Human eye may you studied this part. So as you can see, reflexes. These are the reflexes which are there with respect to the eye. That is controlled by the midbrain. Now going back, I'd like to take one more point which I forgot, right? Which many of you are telling me. This is the diencephalon, which is your hypothalamus and thalamus, right? Now thalamus that is there is basically like a point where information, it's a relay center. So through that some information will go to different parts, okay? But your hypothalamus, oh everybody is so worried about hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is a small part which is there in your forebrain. It is responsible for regulating your pituitary gland, right? So we see that it's responsible for regulating your pituitary gland, and apart from that we also see that it regulates temperature in our body also. Temperature regulation. This right here is done by the pituitary gland, right? Master of master gland is pituitary gland. Very good. Okay? Now, pituitary gland is also present as a part of the forebrain. So, this part that you see right here, that is the pituitary gland, right? Uchiha, epic Uchiha. Arey, you are a Uchiha fan, I think, right? So, now of course, see, thalamus that is there is like a relay center. It's like a call center basically, no? So much information will be coming from different parts to the forebrain. But through the thalamus, they are redirected to where it has to go. So that is the function of thalamus, right? While on the other hand, your hypothalamus, like I told you, is responsible for regulating temperature and is master of the master gland, right? Yes. Ma'am, is hypothalamus a gland or is it only a part of the brain? See, hypothalamus, I will always call it a structure, but it does have neurosecretory cells. So, let's stick to part. It makes my life easy. Ma'am, function of midbrain. Function of midbrain is, bacha, is to control reflexes of the eye, right? Yes. Ma'am, how exactly is information stored? See, memories. Now, like I told you, information getting stored that is there in the brain is of course through various impulses, right? Information is stored and it's basically like, see, our brain, if I cannot make it, there are various complex pathways which I cannot explain right now. Because if I tell that, you'll be like, "Arey ma'am, nahi hoga mujhse ye chapter," I will give this chapter up right now, right? I know it's very interesting for all of you, but there are various interconnections that will happen. It's kind of like, imagine, it's a, what do you say? It's kind of like a big network, right? So just like how you have, you know, these phone companies which have the satellite network that connects different parts together, it's kind of like that, right? It's as complicated as that. And even now we are discovering how all of this is there. So there are some things for which I may not be able to give you a conclusive answer. Yes? Are the chances of this difference coming in paper? They will mainly ask you functions of forebrain and they will ask you mention also hindbrain, right? They will ask you this part. Khushbu, hypothalamus. Oh, you're answering Khushbu. Okay. Next you have hindbrain. Somebody here was like, ma'am, pons. See, hindbrain ka 3 parts hoga, right? Midbrain ka sahej parts nahi hai. It's just one part, tubular part. Okay, that's all. Hormone, I'm coming. Don't worry. We have so much left. Oh, I'm very worried. I've nicely taught so much to a point when I realized that I still have 3/4 of the chapter left. Now see, hindbrain has 3 parts. Pons, we have cerebellum, and we have medulla. Okay? We have all these parts. Now pons that is there is a small part. Okay? Yes, Princess Diary, I just elaborated now. I'll tell you again anyway. Pons is responsible for regulating, right? The breathing mechanism it controls, or it's the respiratory center, exactly. So it regulates the breathing mechanism that is there. While on the other hand, your cerebellum that is there is responsible for maintaining posture and body balance. So if I am able to stand upright, walk upright, yes, and if I have a proper posture, we see that it is because of my cerebellum. While on the other hand, we see medulla that is there is responsible for controlling various involuntary activities. Now medulla is also known as medulla oblongata, very good, and we see that it is responsible for controlling heartbeat, swallowing, various things that go on, right? So this is what we understand as the functions of hindbrain, right? Subconscious, see, site of intelligence and consciousness mainly come with cerebrum, but recently discoveries have been made that cerebellum also has a role. So to be honest, that is vague area, right? Ma'am, okay. Then of course we see that the medulla that is there will extend downwards and it will form the spinal cord, right? So we see that spinal cord is a long tubular structure that extends from the base of the brain and of course down all the way. And we know that the spinal cord here is protected by the vertebral column. That of course is a protective bony casing that is made up of 33 bones. Yes? So with this, of course, we know that what is a function of spinal cord? To relay information to the brain from the lower parts and information from the brain to the other parts, right? So these are the basic functions that are there. Ma'am, brain is divided into three parts. How do we dream? Dreams and all of that is mainly part of the forebrain that is there. Sleep cycle is regulated by the pineal gland, right? Yes, I am not ignoring anybody. Ma'am, breathing in both action. Breathing, mainly involuntary action, right? Yes. Melatonin, AV, that is not melanin. Melanin is the skin pigment. Melatonin is what is the sleep hormone. Thinking part, forebrain. Ma'am, there are no parts in forebrain. Arey, forebrain mein cerebrum is only a very big part, right? Okay, now is a very right time. I will take more questions, but up until then, 5-minute water break for all of you and me. So we will take a 5-minute water break because we have covered central nervous system. Now we are left with chotu topics. So we will resume at 8:30. In the meanwhile, don't forget to like the video. Yes, that does not look appropriate. Don't forget to hit the like button. That is all I would ask. And don't forget to subscribe. ठीक है. I'll be back. Hello. Hey, I'm not late. Just give me one moment. I'll get my water bottle. Yes, time is over. And what? 1 minute I'm late. Everybody's like, late OP, late OP. Yes, we are back. Next chapter, Abhi next to hum top 30. We are going to do 30 most important questions from biology, right? So next week we'll be doing full question practice because we've done with chapter summaries and all of that. So we will do a complete practice end to end. Then we have a surprise, right? Okay, ma'am, thinking is involuntary when we are dreaming. I can give you an answer, but I want to be accurate, so I will let you know in the comments, right? Tejasvi, because when you are dreaming, it's not technically involuntary, right? Because basically the concept of dreams is basically you have various scenarios or various images that come together and then your brain has that. So it is not entirely involuntary, but it's not entirely voluntary also. You cannot really put a pin on it and say this is what it is, right? So see, when we talk about, understand that whatever we discuss, see, when you're talking about dreams, emotions, and they are not considered to be actions per se, right? What is an action? It is a movement. In all these cases, we are categorizing them based on action in terms of a response, right? But apart from that, your brain is also responsible for various things which comes under a different category of us being a conscious organism. So that concept in itself is a very different thing, right? Thank you, Sri Varshini. Thank you so much, right? Yes. Now, remembering per se, memory and all of that is your forebrain, right? See, now lucid dreams and everything has come. That's different altogether. Some other day we will do chai pe charcha, or maybe we'll do a kind of discussion on these kind of topics, right? Thank you, Avi, for telling your function of pons, right? Pons that is there is basically the respiratory center. Now we have learnt about the functions of spinal cord and brain, and we've understood that broadly there are functions which are voluntary and involuntary that are going to be regulated. But now in the example that we took earlier, where we touched a hot object and we withdrew, or she withdrew her hand immediately, do you think this is voluntary or involuntary, right? Is this particular action that we see right here, is it voluntary or involuntary? Yes, can you tell me? CSF stands for cerebrospinal fluid. Voluntary or involuntary? Is it voluntary? If I withdraw my hand, do I think before withdrawing my hand? Do I control? Do I be like, oh, you know what? I can touch this for a very long period of time, so I'm going to keep it as it is? Yes, I will not do that, right? So this has to be involuntary. Now just give me one moment, students. Yes, sorry about that. So basically, as you can see here, this particular action is involuntary, right? No, I had a small emergency, so I had to go out. But we know that this right here is what we call as an involuntary action. But can I ask you one more thing? Let's take another example. Let's say heart beating, right? Heart beating that is there is also involuntary, right? It's not like we have to think about our heart beating. So how is this involuntary action different from the involuntary action that we see on our screen? Heart beating is an involuntary action, but that is different from what we see on our screen. So what is the difference? The difference here is that what you observe on your screen is immediate, it is quick, it is so quick that you don't even think about it, right? So we see that this kind of action, which is quick and sudden and immediate, is what you call as a reflex action. And this right here is brought about with the help of a stimulus. Very good, Tejasvi, very good, right? So a reflex action is a quick, sudden, involuntary action, nearly instantaneous, right? And often reflex action that is there to protect us or mainly protect us from danger. So we see that the impulse, right? This particular impulse. Now for a reflex action, the response is very fast, right? You have to withdraw your hand immediately, which is why in this particular case what happens? We see that it needs to be instantaneous. So in this case what happens? The nerve impulse has to take the shortest route possible, right? So the shortest route taken by the nerve impulse is what we call as a reflex arc. I hope all of you are clear between the difference between a reflex action versus a reflex arc, right? Students, you need to be very, very important. Cosmotalk, I will do that a little later. Let's focus on here. Reflex action is the action, right? Like basically me withdrawing my hand is the action, while the shortest route taken is what we call as a reflex arc. Now what happens? What is the pathway that is taken? Now we know that there is the stimulus here. Now we see that the stimulus is perceived by the receptor. So the receptor in the fingers, right? So here we see that receptors in my skin will detect it and information will be passed by the sensory neuron, right? So from the sensory neuron, information is passed and it is taken to the central nervous system. Now in this case, because it is a reflex of my hand, we see that the spinal cord is involved. Now I have a question for all of you. Is the brain involved in a reflex action? Is the brain involved in a reflex action? Yes or no? I need the answers as yes or no, right? Group of cytons is called as ganglia. Toxic as ever. Arey, you still didn't tell me your name. Brain is not involved. We are so sure. Indirectly involved. Very good. Yes, I want the answers now. See, those who Arjun. Thank you, Arjun. I forgot. Thank you. I'll remember now. It's very good, very good. See, you cannot say that brain is not involved. That is incorrect. But sadly, as per your textbook, sometimes you may have to say that, right? So let me tell you one thing. Even though, especially if you tell me, I say reflexes of my hand. So what happens is that when it comes to reflexes below your neck and below, we see that the shortest route the impulse can take is to the spinal cord, which is why large number of reflexes are controlled by the spinal cord, or the decision is taken by the spinal cord. But it is not that spinal cord will be like, bro, I have decided, yahi karega main. No, it's not like that, right? Spinal cord will of course go and it will send an information telling, bro, I have done this, right? I have taken this decision. No, so it will pass a message as well to the brain. So simultaneously, it will also send a message to the brain as well, stating that this has happened. Because at the end of the day, brain is our boss man, right? We cannot, not that there's something that brain cannot do. Yes? I mean, brain would not know. So that's important to understand this. So reflexes, neck and below is controlled by your spinal cord. But there are, like for example, reflexes of the eye, right? All of this is controlled by the brain. So that is something you need to know. Now, once the decision is taken, we see that the motor neuron will take the information away from the central nervous system all the way to the effector. So this right here is the pathway that is there, right? So we see that this right here is a quick pathway, and as you can see, message to the brain is being passed. Yes? Ma'am, spinal cord didn't give a feeling, give burning feeling. Ma'am, how are brain and spinal cord connected? The medulla oblongata will extend and form the spinal cord. So that's how they are connected, right? Yes, all right. So let me just refresh my screen once. Okay. Ma'am, what is the, see, I am not going into the details of it, because if I start teaching cortex or if I start going into gray matter and all of that, it's a little beyond CBSE, which is why I don't want to touch on that. I will definitely do a separate video for the same. That is my promise to you, right? It's not like I don't want to teach you, but if I get into all of that, we will never finish our class today. Ma'am, in reflex arc, that is the only involuntary character. Ma'am, in reflex arc, is that the only involuntary action carried out, or both, ma'am? See, involuntary action, see here in this case, it is quick and immediate, right? So it depends on the stimulus. So reflex arc is basically the shortest one. Ma'am, reflex arc, first dilation of pupil. your light and dark adaptation that you have studied. So when you watch a movie, right, or let's say you are in a dark room and you go out into the bright. So imagine you've been sleeping all day, keeping all the curtains closed, your room is dark, and suddenly it is only 12 in the afternoon and you have decided to go out. Bright light hits your face. That is a reflex, right? Current shock. Current shock is different. That is different. Okay? Yes. So with this everyone, we are done majorly with central nervous system, right? Now we will move on to peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system, it is not very important. There are just a few pointers you have to remember. So I will go through this part quickly. Students who want to know what is ANS, PNS and all, I will briefly tell you, ANS and somatic nervous system, I will tell you that in just a bit, right? Ma'am, can you please give the reflex arc for dilation of pupil? Same thing, bacha. Your stimulus is going to be light. Receptor is going to be photoreceptor. Then from there, it will go through the sensory neuron all the way to the brain. From brain, in the case CNS. From there, it will be motor neuron and muscles of the eye. It's as simple as that, right? Ma'am, spinal cord didn't give the feel of burning. It is recognized by brain. Hence, we also, yes, very good, Sanjay, very good. Yes, correct. Now, moving on to PNS, right? PNS stands for peripheral. That means it's found in the periphery and it is a link between the central nervous system and the external environment, right? Welcome, Selena. Welcome. So in this case, as you can see, right, what do we understand? We see that if all these actions have to happen, information from brain has to go to the other sides. Who is going to connect? It is going to be my PNS or my peripheral nervous system, which mainly includes nerves, right? Now, you have nerves and you have neuron. Neuron is a cell, okay? It is a cell, while nerve is a tissue, okay? Now, if it is a tissue, we see that nerves that are there are made up of a bundle of axons, right? So, all the axons, they'll get bundled up together and they'll be enclosed in a myelin sheath, and this is what we call as a nerve. Now, axon is also called as nerve fiber. Another name for axon is nerve fiber. So, if you hear the word nerve fiber, don't get worried, right? So, we see that they emerge. They don't just emerge at the spinal cord, but they emerge from the brain also. Which is why broadly nerves are of two kinds. You have cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Cranial nerves are the ones which emerge or they come out from the brain. And there are 12 pairs of them, mainly associated with activities of head and neck. While spinal nerves emerge from the spinal cord and they are concerned with all the body, other body parts, right? And we have 31 pairs of the same. So in this case, are we clear? Because nervous coordination khatam ho gaya, right? Yes, easy peasy, not too complicated, right? Not at all complicated. Now we will move on to more interesting stuff, which is going to be hormonal control, right? Yes. Are we clear? How is the Josh? Have we all slept in class? Arey ma'am, nahi ho raha hai abhi. Control coordination mat karo. Today is the day for me to sleep now. Grey matter, white matter is not necessary for board exams. Whatever is not necessary for board exams, I am not taking because I know you are all very curious kids, right? You're all very curious kids, but you also understand that the more and more you are going to learn extra, that's not going to come for exam. So as much as I want to teach you extra things because I believe that you should know, today the class that I have, I need to also think of it from an exam point of view. No, that is why. Okay. Ankita ma'am is going home, so I said bye to her. Now next up, one more thing, right, I would like to tell you is about somatic nervous system and automatic nervous system. So that is a different categorization of your peripheral nervous system where somatic nervous system includes nerves which control all your voluntary activities while autonomic control all your involuntary activities, right? Ma'am, how involuntary actions are controlled by brain? They are not under our control, which is why brain is controlling, no? You think you're controlling your brain. That is what we're still studying. Sometimes we feel like brain is as much as, see, we are what we make. There's always this saying that we say, we are what we think we are, right? Or there are like these sayings where, a lot of sayings are there. We are what we think we are, which means today if I believe that I am the tallest person in the world, or if I say that I am the most confident, that is basically my brain that is there, right? So that's one thing you need to understand. Ma'am, which part of neuron can we see on our skin? Thermoreceptors are there and various other touch receptors are there. Tomorrow you will get notes. Okay? I know. So now we will move on to hormonal control. Now so far if you see, we learnt about, yes, ma'am, miss such sayings suppress the curiosity of science behind things. Miss such sayings. That's a, oh, okay, I know. I feel sad when I have to, Gane, oh, I can't sing, that I know. Okay. Anyway, we will come back, right? I got carried away in between, so we will come back. So now, of course, as we all know, we learned about nervous control, right? So we all learned about nervous control that is there, which is basically done by electrical signaling, and it controls the various body functions. But we also see that we have an alternative control that is there, which is the hormonal control, right? So as you can see, we also have something called as hormonal control, which includes your chemical signaling. Now the question here is, why is it that we need a hormonal control? Why can't we suffice with a nervous system? I mean, we have the brain with us. Why do we require hormonal control? Can you tell me? This is a very, very important question. What is the need for hormonal control? What is the need for chemical control in our body? Another thing that they will ask you is differentiate between hormonal control and nervous control. 3 marks, it has come last year only in board exam. So this year, pakka it will come. So there are some questions which are not pretty direct, but the chances of them coming are pretty high, right? Zainitsu, you can go back and watch it. I've explained all of that on neuromuscular junction and all of that, right? For coordination, okay. See, understand, so far if you think about it, right? We saw that there are certain cells which are present in certain parts of our body, like our sensory cells, right? Or our sensory sense organs, which have the receptors. Then we know that mainly the effector organs, we see that they will carry the response out. So if you look at it, electrical impulse is not reaching each and every cell of our body, right? So we see that electrical impulses are not reaching each and every cell. There are select cells only that it is reaching. Now, along with that, it is not like it is continuously producing impulses. Understand that. It is not continuously producing impulses because cells take time in order to create an impulse and transmit it as well, right? Which is why, what do we need to do? We need to keep it a point and to understand that this right here is also pretty fast, right? So this right here is a very fast response that is taking place. So in some cases, for example, in the case of growth, right? Or in the case of some chemical reactions happening in my body, right? So in the case of chemical reactions happening in my body, I need continuous coordination to happen, right? So I need it to constantly keep happening. So which is why we see that chemical coordination comes into the picture. So we see that chemical coordination mainly includes synthesis of chemical compounds that can diffuse, that can move to different parts of the cell, right? And we see that cells of my body have ways in which it can recognize that, oh, this chemical compound has come, right? And of course, this process is steady and persistent. So this is not something which will take time. It can constantly keep happening with the synthesis of these chemicals. But yes, this is a slow process. So have we understood this? Why we need a chemical coordination when we have hormonal, this one, right? This point of difference you will have to do. So quickly to recall, when I have my nervous system is communicating with the help of electrical impulse. To generate an electrical impulse and for it to go, it takes some time, right? And along with that, it is very fast. In some cases, because it's so fast, it's for an immediate action. Either talking, moving my hand. So these are all very fast actions. In some cases, it requires constant, right? It requires constant control. It is like somebody has to keep looking. Is it happening? Is it happening? Is it happening? Our nervous system does not have that patience because nervous system is like, oh, I have to do this. Okay, I will do this. Oh, I need to move that. Oh, I will move that. Oh, I need to go somewhere else. Then I need to go this, right? So which is why in this particular case, we see that this is the mechanism in which it is happening. But for hormonal control, like for example, growth or some chemical reaction, we need to keep keep seeing, okay, it's happening. Okay, theek hai. It's happening. Theek hai. So that's why we need, there are some processes like growth which require that. Now somebody asked me, ma'am, is puberty and reproductive changes controlled? Yes, hormones do regulate your reproductive changes and the puberty and various changes during adolescence, right? So that is what we understand by this, okay? Are we clear? Are we all clear? मैम एक्स्ट्रा बुक से नहीं आएगा, एनसीईआरटी से ही आएगा, right? Now NCERT में one whole page is dedicated to this, which is why I am star marking this and explaining this point, because this has come in your previous years, right? So this right here is very, very important, ठीक है? Now moving on, we see that chemical coordination in our body is done with the help of some chemical messengers called as hormones, right? And we see that hormones that are there are synthesized by specialized cells. Now these specialized cells which have the ability to secrete certain chemical substances, we call them as glands, right? So we see that glands that are there are a group of specialized cells that have the ability to secrete certain substances, right? So it has the ability to secrete certain substances. Now here what do we see? We see that these are glands. Now these substances that they secrete, they can directly secrete it into the blood, or they may secrete it into a tube, right? So if they secrete it directly into the blood, we call such glands as endocrine glands, while on the other hand we see that in case if they pour it into a tube, we call it as exocrine gland, right? So here we see that we also call them as ductless glands, or we call them as glands with ducts, right? Now here I think Zainitsu was asking me, ma'am, what hormones are made up of? I'm getting to that point, right? I am getting to that point. Please be patient, right? ठीक है. Now of course we know that we have exocrine glands and endocrine glands. Example of exocrine is duct means tube, right? Duct means tube, as simple as that. Ductless means tube nahi hai, directly it's going into blood. Now our focus is going to be on these ductless glands or endocrine glands, right? So basically what happens is these endocrine glands, what they do, they secrete certain chemical substances, right? Now these chemical substances that are there, they are basically messengers. And these chemical messengers are what we call as hormones. Now what are hormones made up of? Hormones are basically proteins, right? So basically they have a proteinaceous nature, and again we have various types of hormones also, right? You have steroid hormones, peptide hormones, you have so many types of hormones which you will learn in your higher grades, right? So as you can all see, we see that this is what we understand as hormones, right? They are chemical substances which carry out specific functions, right? Yes, it will. So what happens is that your endocrine gland is going to directly secrete the hormone into the bloodstream, and this hormone will go into the blood, la 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 la, and it will be floating in the blood, okay? But how does it know, right? So if I say that my hormone is a chemical messenger, that means that it is like a letter, right? So just like how I will write a letter to, let's say, Vibhuti, right? So I am writing a letter to my dear student, to Vibhuti, right? I am writing a letter to Vibhuti. Now what will I do? I will send this letter, I will put Vibhuti's address, and after that I will send it and I will put it in the post office, right? Or in the post box. Now in the post box there will be millions of letters, right? Thousands and thousands of letters will be there in the post box. Now how will the postman know that it has to go to Vibhuti's house? So they know that it has to go to Vibhuti's house because of what? Can you tell me? Can you tell me? 1 more hour, not more than that, maximum. I'll finish this off in about 15 minutes. Very good, right? Very, very good because of the address. This is my most famous analogy. So students who've heard me teach this before, they will know, ma'am, अरे ये ma'am तो वही example use कर रही है हर बार, right? This is my trademark example that I normally give, so please don't mind, right? So as you all see, right, we see that with the help of the address, it will go to Vibhuti's house, yes? So here if you look at it, we see that the messenger here, right? This is my message. So my letter is my hormone, and my hormone knows to reach the cell where it has to pass the message, which we call as target cell. And how is it able to identify that? With the help of the address. In this case, in biology, we will call it as a receptor. So the receptor, there's a specific receptor for a hormone that will tell, right? Ki, this is where you have to pass the message, right? Like a pin code, right? It will pass the message in that manner. So we see that they act as messengers, they take it to the target cell, and of course we see that the chemical reaction will take place. Now what sort of chemical reactions? What is this chemical coordination that we are discussing about? That we will understand in greater detail, right? Now we see that endocrine glands that we see are ductless glands that produce hormones, and they pour it directly into the bloodstream. Now we see that there are various types of hormones that are there, right? So we see that we have pituitary gland, we have thyroid gland, adrenal, pancreas, ovary and testis, right? So these are the different endocrine glands that are there in our body. And all these different endocrine glands, they come together and they form the endocrine system. Now somebody was asking me, what is a heterocrine gland? Now a heterocrine gland or a mixed gland, thank you Indian bhai, right? Heterocrine glands are those glands which function both as an endocrine gland as well as a exocrine gland. So your example being your pancreas, right? So this is what the function is going to be. Now one thing you need to remember about hormones is that the amount of hormones, right? Hormones that are not produced in liters and liters, right? Very little amount of hormone is only required in order to bring about the various chemical changes that are happening inside our body. Okay? Now we will understand. Yes, I will be teaching you feedback mechanism also, so not to worry, right? Now, of course, we'll quickly move on to the different types of endocrine glands in our body, right? Now, exam point of view, let me tell you one thing. They will ask you questions from pituitary gland. They will ask you questions about insulin. They are going to ask you questions based on thyroid gland, right? And of course, they will be talking about this one also, adrenal gland, right? So these are some common topics from which I have seen questions come in the previous years. So star mark these topics, right? So first and foremost, let's have a look at the first gland that is there, which is going to be our pituitary gland, right? Now pituitary gland that is there is often called as the master gland, right? Now when so many endocrine glands are there, somebody has to control who does what, right? So as you can see, the pituitary gland is called as the master gland, which means that the pituitary gland, their main function is to control and regulate the functioning of other glands, right? So what do? They'll be like, hey bro, you do this, you do this, you do this, right? It controls all the remaining other endocrine glands in our body. But apart from that, it does some other work also, right? Now, this pituitary gland will produce a hormone called as growth hormone, right? Yes. Okay, very good. Oh, Ashwini, that's a good question, right? That's a very good question. I'll tell you. So now as you can see, the pituitary gland that is there, it is part of the forebrain. It is present in the front part. It's present at the base of the brain. And it produces a hormone called as growth hormone. Now the growth hormone, so if you see the hormone that the pituitary gland produces is called as the growth hormone. And what does the growth hormone do? The growth hormone actually has an impact on our body, especially during our adolescence phase, right? Where it helps in increase in height. So basically it causes the elongation of bones, right? So we see that it causes the elongation of bones. Now of course we see that this right here is necessary for our body to grow. Now of course one thing you need to understand is that this hormone needs to be produced in the right amount. If there is excess of the hormone, right? So if there is excess of it, or if there is less of this hormone, or what you will call as lack of the hormone, then it will lead to conditions. So if there is lack of the growth hormone, it will result in a condition called as dwarfism. Now this they can ask you a question, right? So if you see this particular question that they can ask you is also going to be, there is a person who is showing stunted growth, right? He is showing stunted growth and body is underdeveloped. Now, if ever you see the word stunted growth and underdevelopment, then you can directly say that it is because of the lack or less production of growth hormone, resulting in a condition called as dwarfism. Are we clear? Are we all clear? Ma'am, what are the lobes in our brain? Bacha, lobes wala doubt and all I will take after I finish. Yes? After I finish this topic, I will take the remaining doubts because I have moved on to the next part, right? Gurnur, it will help you. Questions in exemplar is going to help you. Exemplar mein only questions are there. Now, part of it, yes and no, Ashwini, because there are various things coming in for that to happen, right? Yes. Dwarfism again, sure. See, basically what is dwarfism? Dwarfism that is there is a condition. So what do we understand? We know that growth hormone is a hormone produced by my pituitary gland that causes elongation of bones, and we see that mainly during the puberty phase there is a growth spurt, right? We see that there is a growth spurt that takes place where this is produced in large amounts, right? And we know that at the end of the day that this contributes to growth of my body, right? Now what happens? This is when hormone is produced in normal amount. But if there is produced in lesser amounts, we see that it will result in a condition called as dwarfism, right? And if a person has very less growth hormone, for example, if I have less growth hormone produced in my body, then I will have, already I am short, but I will show stunted growth, right? I will show stunted growth, and of course I will see that my body will be underdeveloped, right? So this right here is important, okay? Akshara, 10 more minutes if you don't mind, okay? While if excess amount may it is produced, then of course we call this as gigantism, right? So this is what we understand as gigantism, where too much of it, right? If too much of it is produced, right? If too much of growth hormone is produced, I will become gigantic, right? Yes. Ma'am, so our height is because of growth hormone. Partly, yes. But the maximum height you will reach is determined genetically, right? Your maximum height is determined genetically because of both your parents, which is why they often say, no, that, like for example, in my case, my mom is only 4'9" or 4'10", and my father is about 5'5", which is why I am 5'1", 5'2". My maximum height is always determined, right? So this is what we understand by this. Now, of course, the next set of hormones. Now, somebody was asking me which is the master gland. The master gland is, of course, the pituitary gland. Now, the function of pituitary gland is regulated by the hypothalamus as well. Not like pituitary gland will just do its own thing. There is a boss who is going to control the functioning of pituitary gland. That is the hypothalamus. Now, we also have the pineal gland, or the pineal gland which is present. That secretes melatonin. This is extra information, will not come in board exam. But pineal gland is what regulates your sleep cycle. Now moving on to next three glands which are super important for board exam, right? First one is thyroid gland. Now thyroid gland is a butterfly shaped gland which is located in the neck region, right? Now it produces a hormone called as thyroxine. Now thyroxine is a hormone which is regulating various metabolic activities. Now what are metabolic activities? Metabolism is basically all the chemical reactions that are happening inside my cells, right? So like my carbohydrate wherever my carbohydrate are utilized, wherever my fats are utilized, proteins are utilized, right? So basically it regulates all my carbohydrate, protein, fat metabolism that happens, right? Now thyroxine is very peculiar, right? Now for my body to produce thyroxine, I require a certain mineral. Can you tell me which mineral would I require? Yes? Which mineral would I require in order to control this? Ma'am, if hypothalamus controls pituitary, why isn't it called as the master gland? Because basically the hypothalamus just triggers the pituitary, right? But mainly, like all the stimulating hormones and all of that is produced by the thyroid gland itself, right? Which is why we call, it's produced by the pituitary gland, which is why we call pituitary gland as the master gland. Yes? Okay. Now, of course, in this particular case, we know that for thyroxine to be produced, iodine is necessary, right? Iodine is necessary, which is why we know that if there is a deficiency of iodine, right? If there is deficiency of iodine in our diet, it can cause a condition which results in the swelling of the neck region. And what do we call this condition as, students? Fatafat. Very good, right? हाँ, क्या आपके टूथपेस्ट में नमक है? नमक होना चाहिए, आयोडाइज नमक होना चाहिए. Goiter, right? So goiter is a condition which is caused due to the swelling, right? This happens due to the swelling of thyroid gland, right? So this happens due to the swelling of your thyroid gland. Because there's not enough iodine, we see that our thyroid gland is overworking itself in order to produce it, right? Yes. Now, how does the master gland control the gland like thyroid gland? It produces some special hormones called as stimulating hormones, right? So, we have something called as stimulating hormones. So, in this case, let me give you an example. We have TSH, okay? This is extra. TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone, okay? So when TSH is released, it will go all the way to the thyroid gland and it will tell it to produce thyroxine, right? You have stimulating, releasing hormones. Very good. So proud, right? Very good. Ma'am, can goiter be cured? Yes, by adding iodine into the diet, right? So there will be a question where they'll ask you, right? Why is it recommended that you eat iodized salt, or why should your diet have iodized salt in it? This is the reason for the same, right? Now, of course, one more thing, that can goiter be cured? Yeah, adding iodine, eventually the swelling will reduce, right? But AV, you asked me a question, is goiter and hypothyroidism the same, right? Goiter is one type of less production of thyroxine due to deficiency of iodine. But maybe due to some genetic conditions, if there is less production of thyroxine, not because of, see, one is when there is not enough iodine, right? Thyroxine can be produced less if there is not enough thyroxine. I mean, if there is not enough iodine. But imagine if there is enough iodine, but even then my body is not able to produce thyroxine, then we call this as a different condition, right? And that is hypothyroidism. So there we see that normally we have a condition called as cretinism, which we see in young children, right? So cretinism is a condition wherein genetically my body is not able to produce it. Or in adults, we see that over a period of time, we see that the body is not able to produce, which is why we call this as myxoedema, right? This is due to hypothyroidism. Diabetes, type 1 is genetic, type 2 is lifestyle. Ashwini, that's for you. Ma'am, in this case, person becomes obese, right? Myxoedema mein, what happens is that in the case of myxoedema, which is mainly seen in adults, what happens? No? Basically, there's less thyroxine. So if there's less thyroxine produced, my metabolic activity has become less, right? My metabolic activity has become less. So I'm very sluggish, very lazy, not able to do it, right? So here in this case, it's quite different. Ma'am, if goiter is less or deficiency, goiter is happening due to less iodine in diet, right? Ma'am, what is the causes of less iodine? Diet may, if you don't eat proper iodine, right? That is why we see that it will have goiter. Excess iodine causes. Excess iodine, I am not sure, right? But somebody was, I think AV was telling me about Graves' disease. Graves' disease happens when there is excess thyroxine. So when your body produces excess thyroxine, that could happen either due to some tumor growth or again due to various reasons, right? It could be again genetic. We see that then it will cause exophthalmic goiter or Graves' disease, right? 10 minute हो जाएगा, 10 minute. This is not in NCERT. ठीक है? Goiter is in NCERT, that's all. This is for others, right? Thyroid gland is present here, neck में बच्चा. ठीक है? Hypothyroidism can be cured by taking thyroid medication, right? Thyroid medication can be taken. Basically, it stimulates thyroxine production, right? Okay. Yes. Hyper, right? Excess iodine, it will result in hyperthyroidism, but not necessarily Graves' disease, right? Not necessarily that. Now, this is all about thyroid gland. Next gland we will discuss is a easy peasy gland, which is adrenal gland, right? Now adrenal gland is what happens, or adrenal gland produces something called as adrenaline, right? And adrenaline is responsible for the fight or flight response. Now in the case of adrenaline, how many of us have experienced this where we are going to give exam? Abhi exam dena hai, ma'am has, our invigilator has question paper, you have answer paper on your table, you have 5 minutes before which the bell is going to ring. What are you feeling, right? Exams are the best example for this, I know, right? You have so much that starts from inside, no? You'll be like, hands are shaking, you are excited, you just want the paper to come and you want to see what is the answer, what are the questions, do I know what is there? Half of you will be like, Arey ma'am, I just want to go back home and sleep. I don't want all this tension in life. Aram se I was watching my anime, my Naruto, and you know, all my Demon Slayer. I was so happy. Now you are making me write exam. What is this? Giving speech also in assembly, right? Actually, I used to be very terrified while giving speech in assembly because my voice was so loud. I used to get scared that people will close their ears, right? Over a period of time, I've come to accept my loudness. But when I was in school, people used to just be like, they used to just do this, okay? And I used to feel so bad. And sometimes there used to be one key sound also that will come. And it used to be so embarrassing, you know. I'll just be like, nahi karna hai mujhe, I don't want to do thought for the day and all. You keep your thoughts for yourself. I used to be like that. I don't want to do this, right? I know, I don't need a mic. Just saying, you know, when I used to do thought for the day, they were like, Aishwarya, you just go talk like that. Anyways, in all these cases, what happened, right? So what happens is that our body, so coming back, I lost my track. But anyway, when I come back to it, when you are experiencing this, your heart rate increases, right? So it used to be like heart rate will increase. No, your heart will start breathing. Your heart will start beating faster. You will see that, you know, your breathing rate increases, right? So we see that breathing rate will also increase. And of course, we see that our body prepares for an emergency situation, right? So this is what we call, or is the function of the adrenal gland, right? So when breathing rate and heart rate increases, it sends more oxygen and glucose to different parts of the body, thereby preparing our body, right? So this right here is important to understand. Soumya, I will take your doubt. Please, I am doing hormones. So I am trying to avoid questions based on nervous system. I will do it towards the end. Okay? If iodine is less, movie clips, what will happen? Goiter. Okay? That much. Devastating discussion. Ye kya naam hota hai? You tell me your name. What is fight or flight response? Either my body is ready to encounter that. See, my body is not... See, we know that I am going to give exam or I am going to do this. But for my body, it is danger, no danger. That is how my body is seeing, right? So either my response is to run away. If I have to protect myself and run away, then that is a flight. I am running away. But if I have to face it, that is fight, right? Ritika, stimulus is any change which is either external or change in the environment, that is external or internal, that brings about a response, right? So this adrenal gland, Gurnur, is what we call as the stress hormone of our body, right? So this is what we call as a stress hormone because it interprets situations as stressful, right? Now, of course, we have pancreas. Now, pancreas is a very beautiful organ, right? It is so beautiful that we have learned in life process. Now, we are going to be learning in the case, or we are going to be learning in control coordination also, right? So, we see that pancreas that are there produce hormones called as insulin and glucagon, right? Now, insulin is very, very important. Now we see that insulin that is there is produced by the pancreas, and there are special kind of cells which produce it called as the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans. You don't need to know this for board exam, but I am going to be telling you this, right? This is just for your knowledge. Now we see that insulin that is there is responsible for regulating the amount, right? So we see that they regulate amount of glucose, or what you will hear as sugar in the bloodstream, right? So they are responsible for regulating the amount of glucose or sugar in the bloodstream. Main karwa dungi. I will explain. Don't worry, right? So again, quickly to recall, I'm going to start all over. Now we have pancreas. We know that pancreas that is there is a leaf-like organ which is located behind the stomach. We know that pancreas produce digestive enzymes, right? So we know that these right here produce digestive enzymes, which we have already learnt about. But apart from that, they also function as an endocrine gland wherein they produce insulin and they produce glucagon, right? Now these are the hormones that they produce. Now on the other hand, we see that, let's first look at the function of insulin. Now insulin that is there is produced by the beta cells, right? So we see that they are produced by the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans. This is extra information. Now islets of Langerhans are basically a group of cells, right, that secrete the hormone. It is as simple as that. Now here we see that the main function of insulin. What is the function of insulin? Regulate. What will it regulate? Blood sugar levels. Now what do I mean by blood sugar levels? It means the amount of glucose that is there in my blood. Now we see that normally, when is the level of glucose higher in my blood, right? When will it be high in my blood? When is the amount of glucose going to be high in my bloodstream? It will normally be high after I eat a lot of food, right? So normally it will be very high after I eat a lot of food, right? So that way the amount of glucose is going to be pretty high. Now in such cases, especially after a meal which is very rich, imagine I had lots of cheese burst pizza, farmhouse cheese burst pizza I have had, my tummy is filled with carbs, right? So what will happen? Once full digestion has completely taken place, we see that there is more glucose in my bloodstream. Now all this glucose that is there has to go to my cells, right? So we see that this insulin, what it will do? All this insulin, there is some amount insulin that is there will help some of the cells take up. Again, I'm specifying it will help some of the cells, right? So for some of the cells, some cells it will help them take up the glucose. Now what do I mean by take up the glucose? Cells will not know that I had farmhouse pizza. Nobody will know that I ate so much carbohydrate, right? But cell will need somebody to go and tell them, bro, you have glucose available, energy hai, respiration karna hai, right? Somebody has to pass the message. So that is the function of insulin. So they will help the cells take up the glucose from the bloodstream. But what if we see that there is excess glucose, right? Imagine there is way too much glucose in the blood. Now that is bad for our body, right? Which is why we see that if there is excess of glucose, we see that it will convert it into glycogen and it will store it in the body. So this is the function, right, of insulin. Now what if there was less insulin produced, right? So what if there was less insulin produced by the pancreas? What would happen? Can you tell me? What would happen if there is less insulin present in the body? What is going to happen? You can tell me now. No, you know the answer to this, right? Exactly. So now when there is less insulin produced by my body, more sugar in my blood. If more sugar is there in my blood, bad for me. Which is why we see that when there is more sugar in the bloodstream, we call this condition as diabetes. So how can we treat this? How can we treat this? If there is not enough insulin provided, I can get insulin injections so that I can control my blood sugar level, right? So that is what we understand. Around 120 to 110 to 120 milligrams, I think, per ml or something like that. You can check it out. I'm not sure. Yes? Ma'am, should we consider triglycerides and glucose as the same? No, they are different. Triglycerides are mainly your lipids and they come under the category of cholesterols and everything, right? So that is different. Now, diabetes can happen in two ways, right? Now one is less insulin. Now if it is less insulin, it could normally be genetic. That means that due to some genetic differences, my body is not able to produce less insulin. Now another condition is what we call as type 2 diabetes, which is due to lifestyle. If I eat so much food, so much junk food, so much carbs, so much sugar in my blood, that how much ever my insulin works, my blood sugar level is still high. So that is different. That is type 2 diabetes, which is lifestyle lifestyle incorporated. Okay? Now we also have diabetes insipidus and mellitus. So diabetes mellitus is because of insulin. Insipidus is because of another hormone called as ADH hormone, right? That is antidiuretic hormone, due to which mainly that controls the salt water level, right? So if there is not enough, then that is the reason. So this is all about your insulin. Now what is the function of glucagon? Glucagon that is there is basically the ulta of insulin. So if there's very less blood sugar and body needs more sugar, then it will convert your glycogen all the way to glucose, right? So thereby it will regulate how much of what should be there in the body. Which is why we see that the amount of hormones that get secreted need to be precise. Which is why we call this as a feedback mechanism. So what is a feedback mechanism? Feedback mechanism is something that regulates how much of hormone is produced, right? Or basically, or would control the function of hormone. So going back, right? Going back, if my body has lot of blood sugar, so if you see high blood sugar means our body will produce insulin, right? And it will make sure that the body utilizes insulin. It will tell the cells to either take up the insulin or take up the glucose or convert excess of glucose into glycogen. But what if the blood sugar level decreases, right? If blood sugar level in my blood starts to decrease, insulin cannot keep getting produced by my pancreas. Somebody has to tell the pancreas, "Arey, insulin ka production bas ho gaya, abhi nahi chahiye," right? Somebody has to tell that. So that is when, because of the decrease in blood sugar level, information will go to my pancreas where it will reduce the production of insulin. So this is what we call as a feedback mechanism, right? Based on how much, right, is present, they will balance out how much hormone needs to be produced. Are we clear now with feedback mechanism? Are we clear? Yes? Ma'am, so during running or exercise or dieting, glucagon increases. So for a prolonged period of time, if you don't eat, right, there's a brief period of time when you feel hungry. But then eventually you're able to still move on. So that's because your body is using reserve energy either in the form where glycogen is getting converted to glucose, or else we also know fats are getting converted, right? Yes. Ma'am, revise pancreas slide. See, bacha, very simple. Our body, we know that when we eat a lot of food, we know that amount of carbohydrate or glucose in the blood increases, right? So we know that in the bloodstream, after we eat, blood sugar level increases or glucose level will increase, right? After our diet, lot of glucose is present, okay? Now we know that our body needs to use this glucose because we've learned respiration. So somebody has to tell my cells like, bro, glucose hai, use karo. So insulin will do this. Insulin will be the one telling the cells to take up the glucose. But what about excess glucose? Now even after my cells took it up, I still have more glucose. So what will insulin do? Insulin will convert excess glucose into glycogen and it will store it. So just like how plants will store glucose in the form of starch, our body will store glucose in the form of glycogen. But now what will happen? Now because my insulin has converted all this, amount of blood sugar level has decreased. So when blood sugar level decreases, what will happen? When blood sugar level decreases, information will go to the pancreas. Bas, abhi glucose nahi chahiye, insulin nahi chahiye, reduce the production. So this way the level of insulin will come down. So based on how much sugar is there in the blood, we see that more or less of insulin is produced, right? So that is what we are clear about. Yes? Glucagon on the other hand. Glucagon, not glyco. You guys have made new names today. See, I am also little, I think I am also mixing up some words, so please don't mind. Glucagon that is there is normally produced when our body needs energy, but there is not enough energy in the body or enough glucose in the body, where it will convert the stored glucose in the form of glycogen and it will convert it back. Okay? Are we clear? I made feedback mechanism as simple as possible. I am not getting into positive and negative because as per NCERT, it is not there. Yes? Glycogen also in muscle cells. Diabetes mellitus Sahej is basically what we discussed about type 1 diabetes, no, where our body is not, where there's either less production, diabetes type 1, diabetes mellitus type 1 is when there's less insulin produced and high blood sugar level, right? Anju, feedback mechanism, this is one example, right? So childbirth, so even during childbirth, we see that there is contraction of the muscles that happen, right? Especially the cervical muscles and all of that. That is wherein hormones are also regulating that. That is also an example of your feedback mechanism. So now, I'm almost towards the end. Last two hormones that I need to discuss is testosterone and estrogen. We have learned about this. Easy peasy. Testis, male reproductive organ, and plus next chapter I will have so much to teach you about this anyway. But now of course testis is the male reproductive organ which produces testosterone, and we see that testosterone is responsible for regulating production of sperms and development of secondary sexual characters in males like facial hair, chest hair, all of that. In females we know that ovaries are the main reproductive organ which produces estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen regulates the secondary sexual characteristics in females like development of mammary glands, widening of pelvis, right? All of those are examples. Then along with that we also see that it regulates the menstrual cycle. Now quickly to recall plant hormones, 5 minutes may I'll complete my promise to you, right? Now we see that coordination so much happened in animals, but plants may also coordination happens. Now in this case we see that coordination that is there, or rather if you were to look at it, we see that coordination in this aspect happens with the respect of movement, right? So here it takes place in the form of movements. Now of course what do we see? Movement in plants are normally growth related or what we call as growth dependent, or they could be independent. So a plant moving is not related to any of the growth related. It's not growing, it's just a movement that we see in plants. So growth related movements or growth dependent movements are what we call as tropic movements, while growth independent ones are what we call as nastic movements. Now in tropic related or tropic movements, we also call it as tropism. Now these growth related movements are in response to a stimulus, right? So we see that it is in response to a stimulus where we have phototropism, geotropism, hydrotropism, thigmo and chemo. Photo means light. That means this is a tropic movement in response to light. Geotropism is in response to gravity. Hydro is in response to water. And thigmo is in response to touch. Chemo is in response to chemicals. Now in your exam point of view, the only thing you need to remember is for phototropism, right? So here we see that in this particular case of phototropism, we see that there is a plant hormone involved as well, which is going to be auxin, right? So this is the main point. Pakka question will come for this. I will write and give it to you. Auxin wala question zarur aayega, right? So we know that in the case of phototropism, the growth is happening in response to light, which means that your stem will grow in towards the light and your roots will grow away from the light. So if it is growing towards the stimulus, then we say that it is positive, but if it is going away, it is negative, right? Now, of course, we see that in this particular case, why is it that my stem bends towards the light? It is because of this auxin. Now, auxin that is there is a light sensitive hormone, right? So just like how we have hormones in our body that regulate growth, auxin is also a hormone which is synthesized at the root and shoot tips, right? So normally we see that they are synthesized at the root and shoot tips, which contribute towards growth. Now we see that in such cases, what happens? Auxin will start to synthesized in the opposite direction, right? So we see that it will get synthesized in the opposite direction or towards the shady direction. Now, why is it shady? It's not shady because it's shady as a thing, okay? Like how we say, no, this person is shady. It's not like that. Just that it is light sensitive. So it is growing in the opposite direction that is there. That's all, right? And because it keeps accumulating in the opposite direction, it is able to grow forward. It is as simple as that. Similarly, in the case of geotropism, we see that for geotropism, it's again in response to gravity. So your stem that is there is negatively geotropic, while your root that is there is positively geotropic because it is growing in response or in the direction, right? Now we have hydrotropism, which is in response to water. So stem again is negatively hydrotrophic, while roots are positively hydrotropic. Now you have thigmotropism. Now, thigmotropism also works pretty similar to this, pretty similar to auxin like we discussed. So, when the tendrils come in contact, so especially in response to touch, normally in climbers like pea plants, we observe this, right? So, when tendrils come in contact with the support, right, we see that growth regulator hormones or hormones which promote growth, we see that they start to grow away from that point. Which is why it is not that they are accumulating one on top of the other, but rather niche se they are accumulating and then it is getting pushed up and thereby growth happens, right? Next, of course, we have chemotropism, which is in response to chemicals. So growth of pollen tube is something which we see as in response to chemicals. Now we have plant hormones, which are nothing but phytohormones, that are chemical substances which are secreted by different parts of the plant. Now, unlike our body, which has certain glands, right? So if you see, there are certain glands that are there which are secreted. There are certain glands that are normally in our body which is present. Let me rephrase. We have glands in our body that are there to secrete hormones. But in plants, we don't have structures called as glands. We just have specialized cells that help us achieve this, right? So we have auxin, gibberellin, cytokinin and abscisic acid. Ethylene to nahi hai syllabus mein, to tension nahi hona, right? So first up, we have auxin. We know that auxin is produced in the root and shoot tips, especially in the meristematic region, helping in growth, cell elongation, and of course, promotes growth basically. You have gibberellins. Now, normally we see that they are produced in roots, and here, of course, with gibberellins, they help in germination of seed, right? I'm giving you simple functions. They help in germination of seeds and, of course, with stem elongation. Cytokinins help in growth of the plant, right, with cell division. Here to cell elongation, यहाँ पे cell division, right? And mainly synthesized in different parts of the plant. Then, of course, we have abscisic acid. So far, if you look at cytokinin, auxin, gibberellin, they all promote growth. While in the case of abscisic acid, they are inhibitors, right? So, abscisic acid is a growth inhibitor, yes? So, it does not allow growth. It inhibits growth, or it's called as the stress hormone of plants, right? So it is called as the stress hormone. So here, falling of leaves, inducing dormancy, right? All of these things are something we see as an action of abscisic acid. Ethylene is not there, so I am not discussing. Last point we will discuss is nastic movement, which is the independent growth or non-directional growth. That means that these are movements which are not related. So movement that we see in chui mui, right? That is your, chui mui that is there is basically your touch me not plant, right? It's not any growth related movement, but when I touch it, it will close. So Mimosa pudica that is there, right? Now, how exactly does that movement happen? Because now we saw that the growth related movements were in response to stimulus and with the help of hormones. But what about in the case of nastic movement? Nastic movement may we see that in this case, right? What happens is that when you touch, we see that there is a change in the cell shape, right? So we see that a turgid cell. What is a turgid cell? A cell that has maintained its shape, right? So as you can see, the one that has maintained its shape. That is because of all the water that is there. But we know that it will become flaccid when the water moves out, right? It will lose its shape. So if Chuimoi's leaves close, it is because the cells have become flaccid, right? So touch me not plant begin to fold up and droop because of changes in turgor pressure. Yes, so changes in cell shape cause this, right? ठीक है. So with the students, I know I told you I'll take 1.5 hours. I've taken 2.5 hours to do the chapter revision. But my only question to all of you is, have you understood everything that we discussed today, right? Because we will move on to the important questions, right? Yes. Jaldi, jaldi. 15 questions hai, fatafat ho jayega. PYQs are there. AV, I'll look into that. At this moment, I'm not able to remember. Seed dormancy is when seeds don't germinate, right? Questions bhi ho jayega, right? So students, all I ask of you is, when I tell you, you commit your time with me, no? I make it a point that when you commit your time, I take that responsibility very seriously, right? I take that responsibility very seriously, where I want to make sure that all of you understand what I am teaching you. So when you spend your time, you should never feel like I wasted my time with Aishwarya ma'am. I want to make it a point that you find every minute of my class helpful. So that is what I am looking for. Prolactin and oxytocin. Prolactin is basically the hormone that stimulates synthesis of milk in the mother's body post-pregnancy. Oxytocin is a hormone that is necessary for contraction of cervical muscle during delivery, right? Apical dominance that is there is basically seen when the plant, the apex part, right, the apical flowers or the apical part, they dominate over. So a plant will grow more upwards than sideways, right? Yes. Noradrenaline hormone is basically a hormone which is produced to, negate the activity of adrenaline. ठीक है. Oxytocin, I don't think it's called a love hormone per se. I'm not sure about that. I will get back. Let's go. Half an hour, jaldi, jaldi. No, 20 minutes mein I'm going to finish the questions. Electrical impulses travel in a neuron from where to where? You have 4 options from which you need to give me the correct answer. Jaldi. I don't have a poll today. Yes, I don't have a poll today, right? So I just probably will make do without the polls. Very good, all of you. Very good, right? My first one to answer, Team 7 guy. All of you have answered well. Correct answer. Impulses that are there travel from which? You know that dendrites are the ones which receive the information. Then it moves on to cell body. From cell body, it moves on to axon. And then axonal ending or nerve ending. Okay? This is the correct answer. Moving on to question number 2. Posture and body balance of the body is controlled by dash. Cerebrum, cerebellum, medulla, pons. This should be cakewalk questions now. Now, see, I'm not explaining anything because you know the answers, right? At 2.5 hours I have yapped. I'm sure that you'll all get the answer correctly. Very good, all of you. Very good. We know that cerebellum that is there, which is part of the hindbrain, is responsible for regulating posture and body balance. Next up, roots of the plant that are there. They are positively geotropic, negatively geotropic, positively phototropic, or is it none of the above? Small information. See, cerebellum is the second largest part of our body, of the brain, and we see that it is part of the hindbrain, and we see that the cerebellum that is there is primarily responsible for maintaining our body posture. That means if you and I are able to sit upright or do whatever it is because of our cerebellum, and we are able to balance our body and walk straight because of the same. Right, Mallikarjun, I hope it's clear. Very good. Roots of the plant are positively geotropic, not negatively, not positively phototropic, absolutely none of the above, right? Moving on to question number 4. This is from last year's sample paper. These are, I remember doing this question with all of you only. Identify which represents the proper tropic movement. I feel like we've done this question. This you should all get. We have done this. But the more and more you practice, more and more it's good for you. अभी तो confidence 1000% है तो 2000 बनेगा. Very good. Is it B? Who has marked B as the answer? I saw some B and some C. It is C only. They have actually tweaked the question a little. Because see, we know that stem is positively phototropic, roots are positively geotropic. In this case, it's showing root is negatively geotropic. No. Here it is showing stem is positively geotropic. No. So answer is C only. Moving on to question number 5. Yes? Give the missing term. Stimulus, receptor, sensory neuron. So easy this is. You should all give the answer correctly. Spinal cord, muscles, cranial nerves, relay nerves. Ma'am, what if they are already parallel? What is this? Learn with fun. Ma'am, what if there is already a parallel glucose in our body? You mean lots of glucose in our body? There's already a lot of glucose in our body, insulin will function, right? Yes, somebody said dudes. Yes, dudes, tell me. Very good. Answer is spinal cord, right? So here, of course, is the reflex arc. What is missing? Your CNS. In this case, it's your spinal cord, not the other ones, right? So quickly to explain the previous question, bachas, observe the diagram, right? What is the diagram that is given to us? Diagram that is given to us, we see that there is a pot where plant is going downwards, towards. This is my gravity. We know that stem goes away from gravity. This is a wrong representation. Here you are showing stem is growing correctly, away from gravity, but root is also going in the opposite direction. Nahi. Wrong. So this is the correct answer. Now moving on everyone, question number 6. Oh, with this of course you've got finished 5 MCQs, 5 out of 5 marks, right? Very simple and easy. Now let's move on to question number 6, right? What is the mode of action in beating of the heart different from reflex action? This is a 2-mark question. And let me tell you one thing, very important. I feel like this type of question will come. For sure. Miss, why not D? Nahi. See, if it is receptor, effector, it should be spinal cord. Inside spinal cord, relay nerves are not there. Relay neurons are there. Nerves are of 3 kinds. Sensory, motor, mixed. You have relay neuron. So that's why it's not the case. Not fast at a constant rate. There is only very good AV. Ma'am, what is relay nerve? Nahi hai, relay neuron. Ma'am, brain is directly involved in heartbeat. Beating of a heart, very good, very good. Reflex action is a spontaneous. So proud of all of you, so proud. So when you talk about it, right, so we know that in the case of a reflex action, it is induced by a stimulus, right? And we know that this right here is quite a sudden reaction or a response that is there. Now, although beating of the heart is involuntary, we see that it is not something that is triggered by a stimulus at all times. It is something that is continuously happening. Now, we, of course, if you were to write it, we see that beating of the heart is involuntary, but it is not sudden. While reflex actions are normally sudden or immediate responses to something. Now, beating of the heart does not require any kind of stimulus to constantly work. While here, for a reflex action to happen, we see that there needs to be stimulus is necessary. Now, we know that beating of the heart is regulated by the brain, especially the medulla that is there. Here, mainly is regulated by spinal cord. Understand that it is mainly regulated by spinal cord. Beating of the heart does not involve skeletal muscles, while normally reflex action does involve our skeletal muscles that are there. So, you can write any out of the 2 points that I have given you. I will give you all 2 marks, right? Ma'am, what if there is no excess or no less glucose in the body? Then your hormonal levels are at balance. Hormones are at balance, right? So, right amount of your hormones will be produced. Okay? Yes. Ma'am, they wrote do not in both. Oh, sorry. So, this, thank you for that. This does involve the skeletal muscles, right? Yes. Sorry, my bad. This does involve the skeletal muscles. Okay? We are good. Smiley face for all of you. Moving on to question number 7. This is a very important question. What is, okay, not this exactly, but what is coordination? What are the 2 types of coordination seen in living organisms? Now, in this case, I will tell you an OR question, right? An OR question that could come would be, why is chemical coordination necessary, right? Or they'll ask you, why is our body requiring chemical coordination when it is also, when we have nervous coordination, right? So this is very simple, easy peasy. Coordination is when two or more organs come together, they interact and complement each other's functions, right? And they help our body work in an efficient manner. Now the two kinds of coordination that is there is nervous coordination and chemical coordination. Nervous coordination utilizes electrical impulses to communicate information. We know that these are fast, and of course we know that they are normally directed to specific parts of the body. While chemical coordination is done by chemical signaling, hormones are involved, and we know that this is a relatively slow process that takes place. So if you get this for 2 marks, you need to write 2 points. You are well and good, right? Aram se. Yes, very good. So you need to remember this point on why chemical coordination over electrical nervous coordination is important. Swastik, location of pancreas, it's behind in the abdominal region, behind my stomach. Ache receptors, I think, ehsas, you're talking about pain receptors, right? Receptors for pain that is there, na? So pain receptors, normally we find it in our skin. Response to pain, and basically that we are able to see. Question number 8, differentiate between spinal nerve and cranial nerve. Now, at this point, you may get this question. This can come for 2 marks, 2 points of difference between the same, right? It's very simple. Both are part of your PNS. From the name only, you will be able to tell me the answer, right? Abscisic acid, it's in response to stress like aging, delaying growth, right? Yes, very good, very good. So cranial nerves arise from the brain, and we have a total of 12 pairs. And we know that cranial nerves, they are the ones which are responsible for coordinating activities or passing information from brain to like face and your neck. While spinal nerves that are there, they arise from the spinal cord, and we have a total of 31 pairs, and they are concerned with various parts of the body, right? So you need to write any 2 out of, normally this can come for 3 marks. If it does, you can write 3 points, aram se, right? Or you can just, it'll come only for 2 marks, not more than that. Easy peasy. Next up, question number 9. Star mark this. What is a reflex arc? Describe the pathway of a reflex arc. 3 mark question. This is a PYQ. This has come in your previous year board paper. Now I have a question for all of you. How many of you, right? How many of you think that you should draw the diagram? Should you draw the diagram here of what is given in your textbook? Or will you draw a schematic flow chart? Will you draw a schematic flow chart to support your answer? What will you do? Very good. I want to see who is going to do this. Schematic flow chart chahiye bas. They have not asked you draw diagram. Until and unless they say draw diagram, you don't need to break your head about it, right? Flow chart can support your answer. Yes? So what is a reflex arc? If anybody is going to tell me reflex arc is going to be a sudden, immediate action, half mark cut for you. I will cut 1 mark there only. This is 1 mark for you. I will cut that 1 mark if you tell me that it is the immediate reaction to it. Exactly. It is the nerve ka pathway, right? So this is the pathway taken by the nerve impulse, right? So this is taken by the nerve impulse. And you will say just the pathway or the very good Yashveer and many others. It is going to be the shortest route or the shortest pathway which is going to be taken by the nerve impulse. Now you will have to elaborate it step by step, which means that they've asked you to describe. So as much as you can support your answer, I will accept the flow chart which you are sending me in the live chat. Very good, all of you. But when you are writing the answer, you will have to write it in words, right? You can't just draw the flow chart and leave it. So you will have to say that the receptors will perceive the stimulus. Then from there, the information from the receptor is taken by the sensory neuron and takes it all the way to the central nervous system, right? And there, in this case, or you can explain it with an example. If you're using an example, you can say in this case spinal cord. Then here we know that the decision is taken quickly, and of course from the motor neuron, the information is passed to the effector where the action will happen, right? Two questions I'd like to take. Swastik corpus callosum is a structure that connects the right hemisphere of the cerebrum to the left hemisphere. What is the difference between the manner in which movement takes place in a sensitive part of a plant and movement in our legs? Movement in our legs is controlled by the nervous system. It's a voluntary action and it's by electrical signaling. What about movement in plants, right? Like folding of leaves, it is normally due to change in shape of cell, right? So I hope you are clear. Is it quickest or shortest? Shortest. Shortest, thereby quickest, right? Very good, Team 7 guy. Very good. Mithali, I have answered your question. What is the difference in which? So it's a good question that I'd like to take in some time. I'll take that once again. So here you can say what is a reflex action and define the reflex arc. And you will have to write this step by step. The flow chart is not there, but I will quickly draw. So you have receptor, sensory neuron. You can write CNS. Then you can write motor neuron. And then of course you can write effector. Yes? Ma'am, only flowchart will not be enough. No. Half mark gone there only. I mean, it's 3 marks and they've asked you to describe. Flowchart is only supporting your answer, right? So you will have to describe if you want to get 3 marks for the same. Now there's a good question Mithali has asked, right? Difference between movement of leg and sensitive part of plant, right? So this is sensitive part of plant. Now what is happening in movement of leg? In movement of leg, first and foremost, we know that this is a voluntary action and this is happening due to the electrical signaling, or it's happening because of our nervous system, and here it's due to contraction, right? It's due to the contraction of muscles. So here it is mainly because of the nervous system, yes? And it is voluntary. While here on the other hand, movement due to sensitive part happens due to change in shape of cell, right? Due to the turgor pressure. So you have to write this point of difference. Now we'll move on to question number 10. Yes, question number 10. List in sequence of events when a plant is exposed to unidirectional light leading to the bending of growing shoots, right? Name the hormone and type of movement. 3 marks question. And I told you that there is going to be a short question on auxin. Yes? Very good. Auxin phototropism, right? Now one more point what you will have to mention, right? Very good, Akshara. My plant starts growing in the direction of light, but Akshara, you'll also have to tell me one more point. What is that one more point you will have to tell me? Very good. They diffuse in which direction? In the opposite direction, right? So we know that accumulation of auxin happens towards the shady side or on the opposite side, which is why bending happens. And we know that this kind of movement is what we call as phototropism. So now, of course, when you are writing the answer, when a plant is exposed to unidirectional light, the auxin hormone is synthesized and responsible for growth. Auxin diffuses towards the shady side, causing elongation on one side, resulting in the bending of growing shoot, right? This type of growth in response is what you call as phototropism. 3 marks. Somatic nervous system is a type of peripheral nervous system that controls your voluntary action. Ma'am, how do auxins promote tendril around support? Again, when it comes in response to the stimulus, the growth, the growth promoter that is there, it will again grow in the opposite direction, right? Thereby, it is able to grow in tendrils. Ma'am, Sharag is like, oh, good question. Are we clear with this question? Sharag, I'll take that. Are we clear with this? Are we all clear? Because I'd like to take Sharag's question also. See, 2 bonus questions we're getting today. Yes. See, reflex arcs continue, right? So we see that reflex arc that is there, they continue to be efficient. So continue to be efficient even now, right? So why is it that reflex arc continue to be efficient even now? Now, if you look at animals, reflex arc is a response to danger, right? Reflex arc, not response to danger, but a reflex arc or the pathway that is taken is in order to protect the animal, right? And over a period of time, if you see, we have retained this character even in higher organisms in order to protect. Which is why we see that because the reflex arc takes the shortest route and it protects us, we see that they continue to be helpful even now, or they continue to be efficient. Yes, so we see that it prevents, exactly, it is to prevent our body from danger. So a reflex action, the first thing that happens, right? So Kavyanjali, the question is, why is it that the reflex arcs continue to be efficient even now? That means even in higher organisms like human beings, why do we need a reflex arc when we have a brain, right? We have a brain that is there to process everything. Then why should I have a reflex arc? My brain can do the job. Now, my brain has to process all this information. But here in the case of a reflex arc, there's no real thought going into it because decisions are taken instantaneously. And in animals, if you see, reflex arc, that is, there is something that has remained, right, from lower organisms to higher organisms. Reflex arc has remained as a trait that we have retained in order to protect ourselves, right? Yes, it's not reflex arc per se, it's reflex action. Correct. It's reflex action, right? So that is one bonus question for all of you. There's a short paragraph which is given in the NCERT. I don't remember the page number, but I will make sure that I'll write it down maybe in the comments of this video because that paragraph is very important. That can come as assertion, reason, question, right? So what we discuss right now can come as assertion, reason, questions. Now moving on to question number 11. Distinguish between exocrine and endocrine glands. Thank you, Tejasvi. Thank you so much for telling me. It's on page 100, students. You can star mark. Exocrine, endocrine, very easy. 3 marks. Aram se. Exocrine glands, we know that they release their secretion into a duct. They normally secrete enzymes, mucus, other substances. You can put salivary glands as an example, right? So salivary glands here is an example. Endocrine glands, ductless glands, right? Oh, it's 102, is it? Okay, thank you, Tejasvi. It's page 102, students, not page 100. Ductless glands, they mainly produce hormones. Example being pituitary gland. Easy peasy, right? So in this case, you can write 3 points, 3 marks. Aaram se ho jayega. Now we will move on to the next one, which is question number 12. I have 3 more questions. Do you think we'll finish it in 3 minutes? 3 questions in 3 minutes. Far-fetched, no? Okay, we'll do aaram se. State the 2 types of movement seen in plants. Give one example of each. Very simple and easy, right? Yes. Karthik, that's all that matters. Hard work, sincerity always takes you a long way. See, I'm not the kind to ever tell you that, I don't know, my teaching style or maybe the way I think is very different because I always believe in imparting positivity and making sure I give you confidence. Because if I just give you positivity and confidence, you will start believing in yourself. And the minute you believe in yourself that you can do it, the rest of it, you've got it covered. You don't need anything more. More and more, you just need to believe in yourself. And till the day you are so confident that you'll be like, "Arey ma'am, I have got it." Then I have nothing to worry about, right? Yes. Anyway, coming back, 2 types of movement that we have is tropic and nastic movement, or growth dependent and growth independent. So one example you can give as phototropism, right? Phototropism or movement of plant in response to light. Growth independent is your nastic movement, which is your touch me not plant. So you can elaborate on the same, right? So 2 marks, aaram se. Now we will move on to question number 13, everybody. What is feedback mechanism of hormonal regulation? Use the example of insulin to explain this process, right? So we know that feedback mechanism that is there is a mechanism by which the amount of hormones is produced, right? Or basically the amount of hormones and its functioning is regulated. Now, in the case of insulin, what do we see? When there is high blood sugar level when there is high sugar level in the blood, then we see that insulin is produced in large amounts so that excess of glucose can be converted to glycogen and cells can take up the glucose. But when the blood sugar level decreases, production of insulin also reduces or decreases, right? So when you're writing the answer, we see that hormones are already secreted in less quantity. Excess or deficiency of hormones can have a bad impact on our body. A feedback mechanism controls the timing when the hormone has to be secreted and how much of the hormone has to be secreted, right? So this is 1 mark here. Now, for example, when blood sugar level increases, information is sent to insulin. Insulin will carry out its job. When there is less blood sugar level, we know that insulin or amount of insulin is reduced. So here you will get 1 mark for telling what will happen when there is more and what will happen when there is less, right? So 3 marks you will get from this particular question. Are we clear? Are we clear with feedback mechanism? Do you want to take a screenshot? Yes? Do you want to quickly take a screenshot of this? Please take a screenshot. Yes. Done. So this topic is very important, right? Like feedback mechanism topic is very small and short, but chances of question coming from this is also very high. Low TSH level means less thyroxine being produced. Tendril is a modified structure in climbers that help it climb, right? Miss, one more time, what is that? Feedback mechanism is basically a mechanism by our body that will tell us how much and when you should produce insulin, right? So if there is too much of sugar, more insulin, less sugar, less insulin. Yash, I have answered. Now this of course is question number 14, which is a case-based question. Normally in exams you will not get case-based from control coordination. From our environment and from heredity you will get case-based questions, which is why chances are less, but this is a practice question we have put. First one is, which among the following statements are true? Reflex action helps to give quick response to harmful stimuli. Reflex action minimizes overloading of the brain. Both statements 1 and 2 are correct. Neither 1 and 2 are correct. Which is the correct answer here? Very good, everybody. Very, very good, right? The correct answer is option C. What is the functioning of reflex action? We know that it is to give quick response and minimizes overloading of the brain, which is why both A and B are the correct answer. I mean, option C is the correct answer. Signals to the lower body will get disrupted if your spinal cord is affected. Breathing is controlled by what? Pons, cerebellum, reflex action, medulla oblongata. Breathing. Last few questions and we are done. हो गया, बहुत सारा हो गया अभी. Breathing, mechanism of breathing, respiratory functions. You guys are asking me this endlessly. It is pons. See, mechanism, I know breathing is very vague, but mechanism of breathing is controlled by the pons, right? So mainly if you think about it, the answer here is pons, all right? Very good, very good. Moving on to question number C. Dash pair of spinal nerves arise from the spinal cord. 26, 42, 31 or 46. Sharag, I told you, consequence of low TSH is the fact that your thyroid gland will not work. Right? Consequences, thyroxine will not be produced. Simple. Very good. Answer is option C, 31. Right? 31 pairs. Last question, name the various plant hormones and give a list of their physiological effects, right? So this could come for 5 marks. So here you will have to list down all the plant hormones, that is auxin, cytokinin, gibberellins. You can just write down their structure and name and function, right? So here you can write down all of this. And you have these 4, auxin, cytokinin, gibberellin. You can write down what it contributes for, right? So 1 mark for listing it down and 4 marks for writing its functions. Auxin allows for cell elongation and growth. Cytokinin, cell division, production of chlorophyll. Gibberellin, stem elongation and germination. Abscisic acid, growth inhibitor. And of course, in the end, we see that it also causes wilting of leaves. So students, with this huge class is done. Right? Now, I told you today's class will take 3 hours. Now, last week, if you were there in my class, I told you I came prepared knowing that today I will take 3 hours, right? So, physiological effect means what are the chemical changes that it brings about, right? So, that is what we mean by physiological effects. The physiology, the chemical reactions that happen. So, this particular chapter's PDF will be available for all of you tomorrow. It will be updated on the Telegram channel. If you have not subscribed to our Telegram channel, link is available. Now, I did know I have a homework question for all of you, right, which is going to be, why are some patients of diabetes treated by giving injections of insulin? So this is your homework question, and of course I will be checking your answers, and you know that. And with this, students, we come to the end of today's class, right? So I know today's class was long and I kind of came prepared. I told you all to come prepared for today's class because I wanted to make it a point that this chapter is very lengthy. Okay, it is a very big chapter. Just like life processes, this chapter is also very big. Now, when you look at how do organisms also, it's a very huge chapter. So, we will take some time to understand that chapter properly. But how do and heredity we will keep for later. But how do is a very easy chapter because reproduction is a concept we've been learning over time. But see, nervous system, hormonal system, so much in detail we have never covered, which is why I make it a point to teach you all in proper understanding and we solve questions together. So if you found this class helpful, you always let me know in the comments. Any more doubts, which I know there are many doubts which you still have, not to worry. Practice will make you perfect. In this journey where in your 10th standard, where you're giving your first biggest milestone, right? Your 10th grade board exam is a very big milestone. And in this milestone, if we are here to help you out, there's nothing more like it. And the more and more we give you confidence, it will give, the more and more we impart confidence to you and belief in you. Trust me, you will do well in your exams, right? So keep yourself confident, believe in yourself, right? I believe in all of you because I see the hard work you are already putting in for this. Don't worry, we've got you covered, and very soon I will see you, students. But up until then, take care. All of you, please sleep early, eat dinner. I hope you've all had dinner, right? So I hope all of you take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon. But up until then, lots of love, everyone. Bye-bye. Good night.